Alrighty, I call to order our final of the year, our December 20th Budget Finance and Growth Committee meeting. As we have done for all of the year, we'll go around and just have everybody introduce themselves. And then I believe we actually have some people watching today, which is really kind of cool. The School Board School folks are we watching online. And so, oh, awesome. So we will start with Ms. Davis and just go around the room, and then Rob at the end, if you can tell folks how they can participate if they would like to while watching online.
I'm Phyllis Davis, the board's administrative assistant.
Good morning, Michael Guston, Assistant Treasurer.
Good morning, Jen Wagner, Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer.
Kevin Ashley, Director of Financial Reporting and Transparency.
Good morning, Dr. Moffitt, board member.
Brandon Craig, board member.
Good day, Shauna Murphy, Superintendent.
Anna Braylon, Community Partnership Project Specialist.
Good morning, Thea Badgett, Director of School Community Partners.
Good morning, Cody Hutchins, Contract Analyst.
Good morning, David Maina, Senior Accountant in Accounting Operations.
Happy holidays, everybody. Stephanie Scott, Assistant General Counsel.
Robert Wilson, Technician. And if you'd like to speak during the speaking of the public section, please click the hand icon. We will ask your name and school association to the district, and we will invite you to speak at the end during the hearing of the public session. Thank you.
All right. So we've got a wonderful packed agenda of lots of fun stuff that I'm happy that we were able to cover today. So I will get us started here with our first update, which is the treasurer search. This is our old business, just for those who have not been paying attention to all the wonderful work that we've been doing on this process. Our treasurer's search, the posting is now up and can be shared with folks. There should be a link out there for folks to share. The big thing I want to share with this is that we have a end of January, I think it's like the 23rd is what our deadline is, when we will start to do consideration of applicants. So for all those millions of people who are looking to become a treasurer in the state of Ohio at a big school district, there's no better option than ours. And so please feel free to share it with folks, both who are currently licensed and then also folks who could be licensed. So there's an opportunities and there's ways to become alternatively licensed under Ohio. So we want to make sure folks pay attention to that. But again, I'll be sharing it probably for the next month or so through my networks. I don't know how many people in my network are potential treasurers, but I will still be sharing it. And so we can just invite others in the community as well. Any other thoughts on that, Jen? All right, let's hop on into our monthly financials.
Morning, we got good news to share today. Our financial facts are fun. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin first to talk about the monthly financials.
Hello, it's me again. Okay, we'll skip to fourth slide, I guess. Again, we just put the financial overview in there for someone who doesn't get to hear the presentation. They can go back and look at those summary items in that earlier slide. So this is the general ledger totals showing cash and investment balances by category. If you compare this to last month, the biggest difference is we did do a draw from Star Ohio to cover our debt payments that were made, or semi-annual debt payments that were made at the end of November. So compared to last month, the Star Ohio piece is a little smaller. The blue, which is the operating cash, is actually a little bit higher, as some of that money is between the two. The yellow is the debt-related amounts that are held. Most of those are in sinking funds that will come due in future years, and then our other long-term investments. So the total there is $215.9 million. Again, all funds, not just general fund. The next slide shows a 3-year history of just our general operating account. And you can see that it is actually a little bit higher in November Again, you have to look at this in relation with the Star Ohio, those being liquid as well. Next slide shows a breakdown by fund type. General fund having $111 million at the end of November. Again, debt service is the next column or the next bar. Internal service, student dining. This month, our state and federal grants, which is the yellow, was actually positive. So we were not waiting on as much money from ODE at this time, ODEW at this time. Again, the total there is 215 million. Two more slides is the general fund cash balance and encumbrances. Our cash balance this year 111 versus last year at this point 98.3. And then encumbrances are a little bit higher, 65 versus 59. Next slide is a 3-year history of the cash balance for just the general fund. Again, a little bit higher than last year, slightly. But you can see the trend lines are pretty consistent. The bump in the green is when we did the tax anticipation notes last year in lieu of the waiting on the tax receipts. This year we don't feel we need to do that. The county has indicated, I believe January 14th, we should be able to get our first tax advance, property tax advance. And at the org meeting, the board will be approving the treasurer to request those advances. So we should be on track to get that bump in January. Next slide is 3-year revenues by source. You can see revenues, the total in the third column, 294 versus last year, 271. The biggest increase is property taxes. The state foundation revenues, though, as we've indicated, are down a little bit comparatively. Next slide is revenue by month, a 3-year history.
Can I just,
Sure.
state revenues are down for 2 reasons. 1, our state share went down because of the trying to update. And 2, our enrollment numbers in the funding formula are lower than we had budgeted for. Most of it is just cleanup work, so we're watching it as it creeps back up as the cleanup happens. Up to where our enrollment is, but it's also lower because our enrollment's lower than it was last year. K-12.
Do you have a percentage, like what percentage is lower? Is it down 10% roughly?
Enrollment,
Mhm.
not off the top of my head.
Was it significant?
No, I think it's like 300 kids.
And we've caught up a few hundred, I think, over the last couple months. So we're hopeful, optimistic that will.
When they submit the student files to get funded, if there's any data that's missing or like the birth date, they put the parent's birth date. So I've done that before. Put my own birth date down in my kid's enrollment form. It creates a fatal error, so they won't fund that kid until you fix the data. And it's a lot of work.
Next slide is revenue by month, or I guess we moved on to this one. The expenditures. Again, the total in the third column, 257 versus 243 last year. So a little bit higher. The blue indicates salary and benefits. We were looking at some data. I think we have a little bit fewer vacant positions at this point, and we do have obviously increases over last year for COLA, et cetera. Next slide is expenditures by month. Again, no real surprise here. Expenditures were down slightly in comparison to prior Novembers, but not really substantial. Next slide is unencumbered or uncommitted. So about 6% of the budget is either non-encumbered, but it has been allocated, it's been appropriated. Some things don't end up getting encumbered until they're ready to be paid. So
One example of that is the tuition that's charged through the state foundation payment. We don't encumber those funds because they just deduct it off of our payment. That's the excess cost and juvenile placement, stuff like that.
and we do build in a little bit of so we have the salary what we budgeted for salary versus what's actually been paid. And we do calculate a little bit of salary savings in there as well. And that will fluctuate as we go through the year. But, of the budget, 284 million represents salaries and benefits to be paid for the remainder of the year. Next slide is one that Mike does.
This is the monthly statement of cash flows. Kind of a broken record, but negative cash flow, which we'll see until we start getting the property tax advances Kevin talked about in January. A couple things actually made it better than it would have been. One is you'll see in other financing sources. This was the money that the Hampton County Auditor's Office gave us back, property tax collection fees. So that was very nice of them.
And then we do that every 6 years.
Yeah, you can't depend on it, but it's every 6 years. They're very nice to give us some money back, so. And then the other one is you'll see a negative in other expenses, which looks weird. But what this is the final indirect cost from ESSER. So what you're allowed to do with state and federal grants is charge an indirect cost amount. That's basically money you get back for doing business, processing, doing the back end work. And so that looks like a negative expense in the general fund and then a positive expense against the grant. So both of those things hit, which are not normally numbers you would see on this report. So I just wanted to point those out. And I think that takes us back to Kevin and preschool.
Yes. So the next slide is all funding sources, preschool students. Again, this is a snapshot at the end of November. Rob, if you go back. Great, thank you. So again, a snapshot at the end of November, 1,909 students. As you can see, it categorizes certain kids that receive ECE grant as well as expansion dollars as 150 students. And then I did add the percentages this month to kind of show how that breaks down.
So for example, the first line is ECE plus expansion. That means the morning is the morning session is paid for by the ECE grant or the childhood grant. That's the state grant. And then the expansion dollars in the general fund pay for the other half. So Vera does a fabulous job of matching available seats with available funding. So just how to read that document.
Yeah. And so it may add, this is only the second month we've included this, so it may start adding like a trend. But for now, just want to make sure we're getting that data out there, especially as the renewal levy that includes that set aside is coming up next year. Next slide is a tuition assistance summary. The key factors on here, total number of students, 741. Excuse me. In the purple row, year to date, number of days is actually less. Again, as we mentioned before, this goes back to the ECE grant funded seats have been increased.
He's got to cook on.
And the state is doing a full day pilot. Wife tells me I need to drink more water, right?
As we're saying.
I have cough up there.
No cough drops?
What is this? It's water.
This is solely because we make Kevin do this every month over and over again. So by the 12th month each year, it's tax.
No, there's a virus going around the department that they're sharing with each other. And so I'm just keeping him at arm's length.
Thank you, fellas, for the water.
And now you tell Phyllis.
I know, Mike's probably going, get it, stop crowding me.
Now you tell Phyllis, right? You on Kevin.
Okay, I think I'm good now. The next slide shows kind of an income statement for the expansion dollars. The middle column of numbers shows the tax revenue that's been received year to date. Compared to the expenses. The United Way payments being the biggest piece there that is then used by CPP for their portion of this. On the next slide, again, shows the number of students that receive some sort of tuition assistance, be it full-time, half-time, or other, breakdown of that. And again, noting here, the state pilot and the additional seats for the ECE grant would reduce this. number.
Because our agreement with the preschool expansion dollars is last dollar in, when new money shows up, it gets reduced from the expansion dollars.
I have a question. Is this demonstrating that the enrollment went down? From
No,
the
we
green,
still-
the green line from the blue line?
We still have 1,900 preschool kids. The number is the students benefiting from preschool expansion dollars because preschool
Okay.
expansion is last dollar in.
Okay.
So
I
because we
gotcha.
got this new pilot, those kids shifted funding from here to the pilot.
Okay, so it's not correlating enrollment, it's just the funding for them.
Mhm.
Okay, I
Yeah.
just want to make sure. We're not losing kids.
And it will, but I do think, again, if we go back a couple slides, I think our total number is down from, but I mean, it's like a fluctuating total because
We typically don't peak until like February
Yeah.
because it's a
Right.
rolling enrollment.
Yeah.
So we may be down at the moment, but we continually enroll all year long.
I think the two questions I have, and I think this is one that we've been discussing for a while, but I think it's most important because we're gonna be looking at the levy coming up. We're not really necessarily expanding the number of total preschool seats at this point year to year, and I mean, in the same way we were doing like post-COVID, right?
Mhm.
Those first couple of years after COVID, and we started growing the numbers back up. We could say we had like 300 new students or 500 new preschool students that we were serving, and I don't know that we can say the same as we go forward. I think we can say we're providing better quality of preschool education or continuing to improve the quality of preschool education for those students or access to. But I wanted to make sure that, because I think as we go into the next cycle, as we talk about what we're going to do with the levy, what we're really talking about right now is sustaining what we have built with additional dollars, right?
Well, yes, and so right now collectively, our budgets are $20 million to get, collective, but the annual funding stream is 15.
Yeah.
So we're using prior year savings to help fund that, but that's gonna run out next year.
And I think, again, even if we figured out a budget on there, it's still really for the number of students that we are currently at. not
Yeah, I think we've
necessarily
kind of
saying
maxed
we
out, yeah.
will Grow up 2,000 or 3,000 more students or something like that. The other question, and I think this is maybe more of just seeing the patterns as we've looked at for the tuition assistance. I guess, when we budget tuition assistance, do we budget the idea that we would have all these dollars for the full year, or do we budget based on kind of the patterns and when they would come to school? Because I think, it's talking about we peak more in February.
So CPP budgets based on their history and their planning, right? They know what the centers and, the economics of the day. I know some private centers have closed down over the last couple of years.
Mhm.
So to get new ones converted over to 3, 4, and 5 stars or whatever the new rating system is, I forget.
Gold.
Gold, thank you.
Yes.
It's probably a longer challenge for them. For the way we budget is based on the number of classroom units that we have and what Vera knows about preschool, like the enrollment and our trends.
Mhm.
And so, then she matches all the funding to it.
Okay, and I guess, I'm thinking about this in alignment with how we're talking about our budget for next year, is if we know, for instance, I guess, are we thinking about the total number that we would be spending on tuition assistance based on the idea that we would have somebody in those seats for most of the year, if not all of the year,
Mhm.
even though that may be different people who might, different times of the year, be in that spot? I guess it's maybe the thought, or is it that we know, basically this amount of seats would be 3/4 of the year they'll be filled, this amount of seats, half of the year they would be filled.
No, it's more of an annual basis, but it's, like historical trend 3-year average of whether it's trending up or down or whatever, but we take the classroom unit, which is a teacher, a para, and a NAPA, that cost,
Mhm.
and actualize it as a percent of the share of what else is being done, the funding source.
I agree with Jen. I was just going to mention how we do projections to her point, and not just as you described, Chair Craig. So we do look at what it's been over time, a period of course of years for the complete following school year.
And I think that's worth noting because we have, the idea is that we have At any given time, we'll have more students or less students, but we're constantly having people come looking for preschool programming. It's going to be a challenge going forward if we are kind of like, and I know this for a fact, for certain areas of our city, we have wait lists to get into preschool programs. And it's not because there's a lack of schools, it's because there's abundance of kids who need preschool. And it's just, again, something we would have to maybe think about as we're marketing and thinking about the levy, because I think the conversation tone before was, let's create spaces where there's not preschool already to remove these preschool deserts. And I think a couple years ago, we had Preschool Promise come in and do the whole conversation about where there's not preschools at. Well, in some ways, we've not say necessarily fixed that or solved it, but the problem now is that we got more kids in areas in some places.
It just needs to be reevaluated on a regular basis because population shifts. I mean,
I have a question. Do we, this might be for both of you, because to Board Member Craig's point, we do have wait lists on some areas, and then we also know about siblings in some schools too. So do we do any type of data collection around the need in the community? So like, for instance, if one school says, hey, I could easily fill up 20 seats with siblings, and then we have them on a wait list, do we do projections to say, okay, well, we could increase this building 2 preschools or 2 preschool classes, and that kind of justify the need to ask for more money? Because we look at the average, and I get that, but I just don't know if, are we really, and then we're talking about preschool, so they're going to get in and maybe be there 2 years and get out. But I'm wondering, do we do any type of predictive?
I know Vera
data?
Vera's always in constant communication with the community and the families. So there are times when she would say, we need to add a preschool unit here or there or whatever. And so we use her data to kind of drive. I don't know, Ms. Murphy, you want to?
So Director Brooks and I just met yesterday and we're just looking at right sizing. Traditionally, so where do we have space available? Traditionally, where do we not? This has not been filled for the last couple of years. Where can we make some adjustments? We just did that yesterday.
Do we do that, like looking at, sounds crazy, but like census data to say, okay, well, in this community, this many 1-year-old or this many kids were born, so we may project 5 years out that I'm thinking about with regard to the levy and the need to ask for more money or to sustain it, because that would be a long-term plan. So do we do any of that? I know we're doing a lot with little, but
Yeah, I think that Jeremy and his team, when we do projections overall, they look at that. We consider where there's going to be new housing in various neighborhoods, or what type of housing. There are some groups that come in, if they're going to do a development, they'll reach out to us and say, do you have a school available? What schools are available? And do you have space for us or not?
Yeah.
That happens all the time.
Okay. So we are looking at the data long-term as well. I'm really saying that in essence for the community, because they need to know, while we have some deserts, we have some highly populated areas, but we are looking at the trend data on a long-term basis too.
So when we do the long-term student projections, we typically look at the census and the births and stuff like that, but at a district-wide level. I'm sure Vera looks at the community level, but in order to do the forecasting, we just kind of look at the district-wide level. And then we start with the school by school, grade by grade, promotion retention rate.
And I have one more question. I know the governor had an initiative around the science of reading and preschool. Is there any state funding additional funding that we could maybe qualify to increase preschool programming?
I think that's the pilot of those kids that are in the pilot.
I mean,
Okay.
Our early childhood grant is pretty significant from the state.
Okay, already.
It's very nice.
Yeah, we increased to 120 seats. So in times of the science of reading, all they're doing is reimbursing the stipend that we pay. We have to pay the stipend first,
Okay.
once the teacher goes through the professional development.
Okay. But for the preschool piece, we already are getting extra money.
I think it's a pilot, so we don't know what the long-term plan is.
Okay. I was just thinking about that around the preschool promise money and any longevity for sustainability for that program. But thank you.
just the last thing to put on there for us to be thinking about, this is more for board, and we're probably in line with superintendent. It's just, I think one of the things we talked about when we did the negotiations with Preschool Promise is having time to come in and discuss kindergarten ready and those measures. Because I do think that's the other selling point for the levy, or at least that portion of the levy, is the number of kids who come to, especially come to PPS, kindergarten ready, because of the preschool education they receive. And so I think that's something we talked about doing some time to talk with them about numbers as to students who trans or who go from Preschool Promise program to CPS, who are kindergarten ready.
So the January 6th board meeting, the agenda item out of administration's office is preschool, focused on CPS preschool classrooms. And so Director Brooks will share with you the student result data and how that impacts kindergarten as a part of her presentation.
Awesome. Because again, I think some of these things are things we could sell as part of the levy package, right? Like, this is why these things
Yeah.
matter. This is why this dollar investment has worked. And I mean, again, I thought the video that Preschool Promise did, that when they came and did their presentation a couple months ago, was very impactful to see, these kids talk about what they learned and how they learned and how it benefited them. And to do a little bit more of using our students as a way to show dollar investment. Sounds great. But we will keep ourselves moving here. State and federal grants, I think, are
All
next.
right, let's do it. All right, next slide, Rob. So Ms. Haygood is off on a well-deserved vacation, so I'm doing state and federal grants this time. So as you can see, the monthly graph, we're again ahead of schedule, which is looking nice. Next slide, Rob. So just working on making sure things get spent. We're hitting our spending targets for both our public and non-public grants. Big things for November, obviously finalizing ESSER and getting that final expenditure report done, and then doing a revision to the budget. So if you hit the next slide, Rob, just so you guys remember, this is kind of the consolidated app of what we have today. Reminder of what we get to help the non-publics manage as well. They get their portion. And what you'll see starting next month will be loading in of carryover. So now that we have our budget revision done, if you hit the next slide, Rob. This is kind of our high level entitlements grant summary. This is all the title programs. Spending looks pretty good across the board. You can see, let's talk about Title IV. We've spent all of our Title IV for this year. So when we get carryover in, that'll drop back down, which is a good thing. This was planned. And we did a lot of really good stuff around world languages with this money. So very nice. Only one there that looks a little odd is the expanding opportunities for each child grant. I did take a look at that budget. They have a lot of expenses that are second semester expenses. So some stipends, some extended time, some test prep services. So while it's low, like, it's understandably low. So I expect that'll catch up, as we get into second semester. Next slide, Rob. Yes.
Hallelujah.
All right, awesome. Yes, I stole that picture from Edgeonomics. But yes, we are done with ESSER. So
I mean, I see $2 still available.
yeah.
Is there any money?
No, there's no, we are done. There's nothing more we can claim.
Yeah, check out
but-
the next slide.
But yeah, it's been, next slide, Rob. It's been quite the thing. I think next month we'll come back with more of a summary of what we got with our ESSER investment for everyone. Just put a little time to put that together over a multi-year period, but
And I really wanted to call out and celebrate the grants team, because they did this $325 million multi-level grant without increasing staff. So it was a pretty heavy lift for their department, because very compliance driven, a lot of moving parts and a lot of rules that keep changing. So great job, grants team.
And I just want to note, again, this is a large sum of money that we were able to both utilize on time, right, to get all this work done, but that it did not hamper our abilities to do other things. And from across the country, the biggest issues that some districts saw with ESSER is that they would get a lot of money. They ain't got a lot of money. So then you trying to spend a lot of money without, getting that money back right away. And we were able to do this in a very efficient manner to get a lot of things done for our students and to do it on time, on budget. use of dollars that we were given, and a good, good fiscal stewards of the dollars that we were given. So really great job from all the folks in the district.
Thank you. I think that is the end of the grants slides. Are there any questions?
I'll take over from there. All right, so good morning again. This month on our return on investment topics, we are talking about the fun topic of resource coordinators. And I just want to say thank you to Mr. Badgett and his team. Miss Anna's here with us as well for all the collaboration they did in preparing this data and being here as well to answer any questions or correct any misinformation I may give on accident. So, all right, first slide here. I just want to highlight some key terms because as I was going through this, and the biggest thing I'm taking away from doing these ROI projects is really learning in depth about the projects and what goes on. Because from the financial side, yeah, we see all the back end financial transactions, but we don't always get to see what goes on. So in working through this, there were some different things that stuck out to me, and I just wanted to just educate a little bit. So some key terms: LSDMC, or the Local School Decision Making Committee, is a committee of 12 people that are responsible for finding our lead agencies, which then our lead agencies are the ones who employ the resource coordinator to go out and do the jobs and meet the needs that they are supposed to meet. And here on the lead agency section, I just want to highlight something pretty impressive here. The evaluation, there is a formal mid-year and final year eval for the lead agency that is completed. And that's really just so we can keep ourselves accountable, keep the lead agency accountable, make sure that jobs are being done, things are being done the way they're supposed to, and just that level of accountability is there. So you don't have to click on it, Rob, but there is a link on that blue hyperlink that shows the evaluation through and through, if anybody would like to see that. Next, we have our community partners. These are the individuals that are recruited by the resource coordinator based on the needs that are identified by the school and found by the resource coordinator. So school identifies the needs, lets the resource coordinator know, they go out to the community, find those partners to provide that service. And then finally, our resource coordinator. So they support this community learning center. They recruit our partners. They're huge in connecting our schools to the needs that they need. And really, you'll hear a word that we use a lot here: engage. So engage the community, engage the student, engage the family, and really engage our staff as well, just around all these topics. So we can go to the next slide, Rob. And you guys have free reign to interrupt me anytime you would like. So, big slide here, the tools for measuring impact. So these are things that are already in place for Mr. Badgett and his team and how they keep things accountable. First thing would be the reform tool. So this is responsible for reviewing the data, engaging the partner, focusing on the student, offering support, get a little reset in there, and then measure the impact. And so why I put this on here, why I thought this was cool. Robbie, you can go ahead and click on that Riverview East example if you'd like, and we can kind of, oh, maybe. If I didn't do the properties right, I could click. Oh, there it is. So this is an example that Miss Anna was able to provide for me on the use of a planning tool. So what it's really using the school's one plan to go through, identify their needs, identify what the resource coordinator can do for that school, and based on goals that are written in that one plan that align with the strategic plan of the district as well. And then on the second tab, you can see that there is strategies that are aligned here. So these are the different strategies that align with the different needs. It'll list a partner there as well that is going to provide that need or that service, and just give some detailed information about how that goes in. And then on the final slide, we have the partner log. And I thought this was cool because what this does is it gives a detailed description, gives the type that the partner is, the partner information. But if you go to the right, Rob, what this also does is there's a column that shows how and what strategic, that column that's highlighted with colors, what strategic alignment or strategic goal we are aligning this program with. So everything kind of ties back, and it just shows the importance of keeping that accountability and tracking that. So if you want to go back, yep. So monthly impact report. So me personally, I love this report and what they were showing me. What this is data collected via Google form based on what the resource coordinator did for that month. So the partner that they brought in, the service being provided, the estimated number of students being impacted, and the estimated number of donations that partner collected within that month. And it really, I think this is important because it does do a monthly reporting of tracking and donations that are recorded by the resource coordinator that we can then use, and we'll talk about here in a second, to track and see how much money is being brought in. So At this point, I kind of want to hand over the floor a little bit to Anna and Sierra to talk about the monthly impact report and the reform tool, to see if there's anything I left off or anything else you guys would like to highlight on this.
Thank you, Cody. I think it's very, very important to highlight that the monthly impact report that we get from our resource coordinators. It gives us a glimpse of what's going on in the schools each month. And the great thing is we work with all our lead agencies and they complete one report. In the past, they had multiple reports. So we streamlined the process. So as soon as they hit submit, it goes straight to their lead agency and our office so we can see what's happening in the schools.
Thank you, Sierra. Yeah, and another reason I think this monthly impact report is important, if you want to click on that example, Rob, I'll show why. Hopefully it doesn't do the same thing. So this is an active example for the month of September for Riverview East. So as you can see, what it does is it gives the partner of the program what the program that they did, and then the number of students there or families. So really what we can use this tool for going forward in the future is getting that estimated per pupil, that per pupil cost of what that program is that they brought in. Anna and her team are able to take this data, it exports to an Excel document that they can extract that data, and we can get an estimated number of students that were impacted by that program for that month. So it's really, really some good tools in place that they have for tracking this data.
Can I just say, I'm super impressed with the efforts that you did in a short time towards the tracking and accountability and return on investment. I'm really pleased. Thank you.
All right, and we can go to the next slide, Rob. All right, so just some celebration here, to calls for celebration. So I asked Anna provided this data for me, and what this is for the months of September through November, the estimated donation value recorded by resource coordinators is $552,000. This number came from those monthly impact reports. So the resource coordinator puts in the estimated number of students that they thought they impacted. Anna takes that data, takes it out manually and puts into a spreadsheet, and we can get an overview of what that looks like. What we're doing is we're going to take this information, obviously reconcile it against the treasurer's report, make sure that all donations are being recorded and tracked properly. But yeah, we just want to take cause for celebration here because that's a huge number. 46 different schools impacted, 45 resource coordinators used, as Rising Stars, Ezard Charles, and Vine share one. And this also, just a note here, this does include about a $38,000 grant that was awarded to the Ohio Arts Council, but they are deciding to disperse it at Woodford Academy. So just some good things to highlight and take here. So before we go into the per pupil breakdown graphs, did anybody have any questions about the process for measuring impact or anything of that nature?
So just two questions, and I think this kind of goes into, for me, the longer and bigger conversation around resource coordinators and their role is I think it's helpful to see how you guys are measuring the success in programs. I guess the question also becomes of, are there opportunities to merge the work being done in certain ways in certain spaces? Because I'm thinking about, like, we have some schools now we are doing where they're process of growing from one school to another, or going like Schroeder Junior High and Schroeder High School may have some of the same needs and resources and investments. It might be something that our resource coordinators coordinating in that way or fashion to look at how to do more than just one building at a time. I guess it's more this.
So Schroeder is doing two buildings, Schroeder and the Promise Center. Two different buildings, same resource coordinator.
And I guess I'm thinking about, like, just the things that resources they're connecting up to. So some of the different partners that they're utilizing, is it something that they discuss in some way, or are they able to coordinate with each other? So for instance, if a partner says, I have more than what you need, are there other schools that need this particular good or service or benefit? How do they connect up to each other?
I'll just add that we're streamlining the process. So this reporting, this impact, the way we're doing it now is new for us. So we're definitely looking at, our department's definitely looking at what resources are coming into schools and then how we can streamline it.
And I bring that up also because we talked about this before when we looked at contracts, and we saw schools who were doing like 8 schools all were working with, the same person. And it was like, well, couldn't we just bring together everybody to say what all do we need to that one person? So I mean, I think that's something that may be a future thought process with it, and how we maybe streamline some of the work resource coordinators are doing, so they're not having to each call out to that same person by themselves.
So along that line, I know the board was very clear that we don't want to get rid of resource coordinators. I think everybody got that memo. However, I would like to see exploration of more efficiency. And the reason I say that is because I'm coming from the Gear Up old Bob Cease era where we did share we had the cohort model and one person had like 3 schools and then they followed those kids. But there's validity to sharing services across buildings. And so while we're looking at it from being fiscally responsible, an efficiency model, it's really also about benefiting the kids efficiently academically too. So I know Superintendent Murphy has heard it from me, but is there any plan around looking at the model that currently exists and making that in totality be more efficient so that maybe it doesn't look like this? We got 46 schools with 45 resource coordinators. Maybe it looks differently. What, if any, data are you finding that could lend itself, or are you working to doing more with what we have for the benefit of academic sustainability and continuity? I'm interested to see, of those kids that were impacted with $552,000, what are their grades? Are we seeing an improvement with regard to wraparound services for them? Like, it's more to me, it's more than just simply the body and the amount. And I know it is for all of our resource coordinators. So I'm not ever implying that. But when I look at the request to make it on a big spreadsheet and tie it in cost per pupil, I look at resource coordination added to that as well. If the resources to that building are inclusive of a resource coordinator and they're bringing in, let's say, Woodford, $38,000, what is the impact academically and extra for those students that got that grant? So we can really say that $38,000 grant impacted them in math and science. It impacted them. So I think I'm just looking for some continuity to connect resource coordination to return on investment, which you all are doing a great job. But how can we again be more streamlined with that? And I think Superintendent Murphy said that you all are already looking at that, but I'm just wondering if you all have thought, if you have any idea on plans to kind of, for me, I call it taking it off the paper. So it's not just about the numbers, but it's about that number had an impact. That dollar went to 3 kids. So it really impacted them and their math scores went up, or they stayed the same. They didn't go down. But do you all have any idea, or can you shed any light on what you're thinking?
I'll say my team and I, we just met with all the lead agency directors and we did a think tank. And in that exercise, we wrote down what's going well and the areas that we can improve. And we're also going to do the same activity with resource coordinators as well. What are they seeing in the scope of the work that they're doing that's going well? And then what can we improve? I think it's good to note that when we talk about resources at schools, giving an example, you see Bearcat Buddies, they're involved in multiple schools. So that's a partner that you will probably see on the reform tool as a partner in different, like 14 plus schools. So looking at that, again, streamlining it if possible. But I can tell you P&G, they provide tutors at 2 or 3 schools. So that resource coordinators are out there hitting the ground and getting those resources, but we definitely can look at streamlining it.
I know they're doing the work, so.
Can I just add that the struggle with the academic return on investment is that when a test score goes up, it goes up because of different influences.
Sure.
You can't always tie it to one activity.
Absolutely.
So I would just be cautious to think that, but they appear to be definitely having a very positive impact on our students.
Oh, the impact is no, there's absolutely no question. So that is not it. I'm really not looking for the reasons why that academic increase was there or that it was sustained. I'm looking for the things that influenced it. So it's not really an issue of this was that. It was, hey, it was $14,000 a student, but they had 50 different things that impacted that grade. So that's what I'm really just looking for. And then my last question is, are we surveying the families of the schools where those resource coordinators are to see if they are aware of the impact to the resource coordination to the building? So I'm looking to make it like full service because you all had a survey for the resource coordinators, but do we ever, or is there any intention to kind of ask the families, hey, how's your resource coordinator doing? Because some people don't realize that the resource coordinator is not a member of the staff. They think of them as just, hey, that's Ms. Jones. But Ms. Jones is actually works for the Y or she works for ABC. So do we do any of that evaluating the consumer about the resource coordinator?
LSDMC does, which has three parents on there.
Okay.
Far as the lead agency and the there's a rubric piece for resource coordination under
Okay.
that. But do we do a survey just for resource coordination? No,
No,
we don't.
okay.
I'm good for that.
If we look at our reading and math scores that come out, right? And if you group all the schools that went up significantly, and then you backward look at what commonalities of services they have, I think that'd be an interesting study.
And that's what I'm looking for. I'm not
Yeah.
looking for this one thing did that. I'm
Right.
looking for a building that may have a cost of $5 million, but they have like maybe 4 stars. What went into that? And
Right.
then, you know, we can look at the data in a multitude of ways, but I'm just trying to take it off the paper to say it's not a good or bad. It's just where can we shift resources to
Mhm.
make a bigger impact? Not that one school is worse than the other. It's just maybe we can shift some of these resources over here to have an impact as well. So that's what I'm asking about.
This
But
leads,
And one thing I wanted to note too is resource coordinators also are the point of contact on the campuses for the mental health partners and the school-based health center partners too. So they coordinate all those needs assessments, making sure that they're addressing those.
I think the discussion being had is perfectly leads into the next part of Cody's presentation, and I'll have some questions afterwards, but I'll let you kind of go into that next
Sure.
part.
Well, thank you for that perfect segue. Yeah. So the next 3 graphs we're going to talk about. Yep, this is perfect. So yeah, the next 3 slides we're going to talk about are breaking out the per pupil allocation or per pupil cost at each school that has a resource coordinator. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I understood correctly, we reimburse the lead agency. They fund the resource coordinator. We reimburse them up to $72,000 per resource coordinator. So some of these numbers might look a little weird, like Ezra Charles and Vine, they share one, but the Ezra Charles looks so much higher because of the cost versus the enrollment at that school. So all these are going to be that cost of that resource coordinator year to date divided by the enrollment. And so that would give us the preschools. I broke them out individually because their enrollment's usually a little lower. Didn't want to skew the data too much. And then the next slide would be elementary schools. So you can see that all the way across all the elementary schools and then their average PPA on there as well. And then the final graph is high school. And the same thing here. So Dr. Odell's, or formerly the Lighthouse, obviously a lower number of enrollment. So that's going to look a lot higher, just to point that out. But as you can see, most of these schools with traditional enrollment numbers are right around the average or below the average cost.
I think there's a conversation point around the cost per pupil that is true to the conversation about the results, right? So how much are we investing in schools where we see the best results? And what are we investing in those schools? And I think that's absolutely a great conversation to have. I think one of the things that also taps into that is when we think about equity. And so like schools where we know that students need more resources and they need more because they're coming from places where even to get on to stay on the regular plane already in, they're going to need this additional resource, this additional benefit. It's helpful to see. One of the things that I guess maybe going to the slide for the elementary schools, that I think it's worth noting, and this is maybe where I was also kind of getting into, and I think may fall in line with some of the things that Martha was speaking about. We know that there are some schools that just don't need the same level of resources, like care for like going to the doctor or care for having after school tutoring in that same sense. But they may still have folks who want to give those resources to those schools. And I think that's maybe a question also to ask is, we look at the price per pupil, is it a fair assessment when, for instance, this school may need more? Like how are we using things like the price per pupil or the investment and that kind of look at it. To say what their needs are first, before we look at whether or not that investment is meeting its return on investment, I guess is more the question, because I can see a school like Kilgore says, hey, like, this is what we need, but this is all we need, we're good. But a school like Gamble Elementary, or like Frederick Douglass, was gonna need more. And they may need more to get to that next step in the grade, and so like, I'm trying to think of how we're measuring what that actual return should be, or because
It's
sometimes the investment needs to be more.
It's almost like if we could figure out a way to come up with the needs index, an index to the cost and to the money they're bringing in donation wise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because there's also programs I know that work with trying to get kids mentors and programming and that type of thing that we could utilize, and certainly wouldn't cost the same dollar, but there are other things that we just need to spend $1, right? And as we as a board are trying to make budgetary decisions each year, I think that type of stuff is helpful for us to be able to see that maybe this needs index is higher at this school. So we know that at this school, you got more students who are just not getting to their healthcare visits, right? So maybe that's a resource that we put a lot of dollars into at this school, but at another school, the issue may be something vastly different. And like, how do we as a board then make the decision as to what's the proper investments of the budget?
There are conversations, for example, children can tell us how many kids they see from any given neighborhood, for example. And so that might be an area where some support health-wise could go. Mental health partners can tell us where there's density in them going to see a mental health partner, a child seeing a mental health partner, et cetera. How many people miss their pediatrician visits, things like that. We definitely can get that information.
And I just feel responsible to say, as the person that brought up this whole financial piece, I think it can be unfair to just look at things from a cost per pupil measurement. So I don't want to imply that that's what I'm looking at. That's like one measure out of, to me, probably hundreds that you could look at. But I do want us to have the data to be able, whatever the data is, to be able to say, hey, if we looked at this 5th grade class across the district, what services are they getting in 5th grade? And then, and that is impacting that. Who's doing really, really, really great with what they have? Who could be using some more support? Oh, and then the cost per pupil. So I don't want you to think that I'm focusing on that, but I do think that we collect the data. We just don't convene the data collectively, if that makes any sense. And that's what Jen's team has been really, because I've been on them for probably 3 years now. They get it, what I'm looking for, but it's just resource coordination is just another area that I think the board really, really wants to support, but I think we can do that a little bit more efficiently. And I don't know what that looks like. I have suggestions, but I don't know what that looks like because you guys are on the floor and on the ground doing the work. How could we be more efficient and really impact the academics and the support services, mental health, social, emotional for our kids? And I think we can. I just don't know exactly how to do that. So my inquiry was more based on, are you all collecting all this data so that we can put it on this huge spreadsheet that's probably going to be 100 and so pages, but
6 point font.
But I think if we get it, we are not just looking at our responsibility is the financial, but it's also about how do we impact. So even if I see $100 a kid, and I wanted you to go back one slide, Rob, because it was one about what I wanted to ask a question about. But if I see that doesn't necessarily mean to me that they're doing something wrong. It just means, what are they doing? So can you go back one slide to 32? Okay. Well, there was another one. There was another one. Yeah, that one. It says like 179 for what did that mean, Cody?
Oh, sorry, the 179, it's in a weird spot, but it's supposed to be pointing to the dotted line average. It looked different after it was published. Yeah, so that is actually supposed to be the average per pupil cost across the
Oh, okay.
there.
Gotcha.
And Dr. Murphy, we can look across the city at maps that exist of where there are food deserts, where there are no dental clinics, no medical facilities, no grocery stores, whatever. That does exist. So we could fold that into some of the decisions that we make.
You're going into my brain because we can inform the city on things that we need if we just keep that data collectively. Like we're paying X number for transportation to medical clinics, you know, I mean, we could just, I think you guys are on the right track. I just wanted you to know where I was thinking.
Well, we had the conversation that maybe we know that Board Member Craig always has passion around the things that we have inherited from the city, the crossing guards, the cost of police, extra duty detail police now, and there's a third one I can't think of right now, but nurses that, you know, if they can help us, that'd be that.
Yeah. I think this, you know, again, I think the conversation we've been having for the entire year around these costs per pupil and the way that we have discussed about how we are allocating resources based on the needs of our students, and literally, which we recognize that our students need more than the dollars that we have as a district to function with. So it is always not an endless pot, but a limited pot of funds. It is helpful to find those ways that we can do that work more efficiently. I think Treasurer Wagner brought up a great idea with regards to the needs assessments at each school might be another thing that we would talk about as a way of discussing. And that really would get into how many classes do you need? How many, you know, do you have sports programs? Do you have clubs? Do you need, is this school in a space where you might need more security for certain reasons, or may need more investment into the infrastructure for certain reasons? I think that's actually part of the conversation we may have to do at some level when we finally get a facilities master plan. Is we would talk about school needs, but maybe we need to talk about like, okay, what does the building need look like? Because is the roof the most important thing in this building? Or is maybe the fact that none of the windows close, or the fact that, you know, you got this, you know, asbestos in one part or something, you know, whatever the main thing may need to be fixed. That all goes into that. What do you need in that building to invest? What do we need to think about $1 billion? So,
Yeah.
Great. Let's keep moving. Go.
All right, so on to the contract review. So thank you for the resource coordinator section.
Good job.
As always, you are welcome to leave once you're done.
Unless you'd like to stay for the whole thing.
Thank you.
Oh.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. All right, so due to the holidays and the crazy schedules, there are a few individuals who are not able to be here with us. So I'll just do a high overview of some of these contract reviews, but all the information of the KPI, the update, and the suggestion for continuance or whatnot will still be in that working document that has all been updated. So first we had Career Tech, about a $540,000 contract value. They had, I think, 2 or 3 contracts over the threshold. They were able to achieve 100% vendor diversity through either locally owned, minority owned, or a combination. So their goal for the KPI was to increase graduation rates from 82.5 to 86 for the class of 2025. And this is for the Cincinnati Youth Collaborative, I'm sorry. And their update, right now, everything is fully operational. Obviously, we won't see graduation dates until after the year starts, but Mr. Turner was positive about how things are going, how the program's running at this time, and has good things to say. So we'll do a year-end update on a lot of these because we'll have to do the year-end data to see if the KPI was met or not. Next section is Department of Student Services. And I think Dr. Hall was saying she was going to be online. Is she online, Rob? I don't know if she was able to find the link or not.
Jeez.
Perfect. All right. So Dr. Hall is online with us. So Rob's going to invite Dr. Hall over to speak on her contracts.
And Cody, while he's doing that, I'm just gonna real quick question on the Career Tech that I think is just something we've been talking about as a board over and over again. The graduation rate is a great KPI, but I also think career readiness at some point in time needs to be part of that KPI. Because Career Tech, if you're supposed to be in a Career Tech program, you're actually supposed to be able to do something within that career. Focus. So I just, if that's something we can also later find pop with.
Absolutely.
I think Mike Turner's her person to talk to about it, but just make sure that's another part of it as we add potentially more career tech to the district.
Thank you for that input.
Dr. Hall, you can go ahead and unmute your mic if you'd like.
Okay. Thanks, Rob. So the first one is our Emergis healthcare system. That is the contract we have to provide one-on-one LPNs. Currently, we have 18 LPNs one-on-one. We need 21 students that need those services, but we have been able so far to find 18 of them. The hard to find position. You can go to the next one, Rob.
Rob, if you want to click on that link, we can do it that way. I don't want to pack the slides too much and put everybody's contract on one slide. Document for viewing slides. And then at the bottom, you'll see the scroll over it. One, I'll put them in order once everybody. Yes, it's right there on the left.
So Margaret, but this is Jen. Good morning.
Morning, Jen.
Before you move off of that first contract, you're tracking the number that are being hired versus need, but what's the impact they have on the students' performance? How are you capturing that?
The students attending school. The students are unable to attend if we don't have an LPN in place for them.
Okay, so attendance should go up, right, on those students? And
Yes.
then what about what about academics?
I can check on their academic scores. Right now, the majority of them are preschoolers.
Maybe kindergarten readiness?
Sure.
Okay, so thank you.
She can start with Western Nursing right there. We don't have to go line by line through all of them if we want to talk about how the KPIs were developed, how we're like what the impact is at this point of the year of the KPI, and how we're tracking that in the different avenues that we're going through and tracking that data. So if you have, I think invoices were a lot of your indicators. So if we just want to talk about the KPI process and how we're doing that student impact there. We don't have to go line by line.
Most of the vendor contracts and student services are for positions that we have not been able to fulfill internally, like Western, cross country, Emergis. So we track the invoices to see how many positions are being filled. With paras, we are struggling to actually have all the positions filled. The two vendors are working hard, but not quite able to meet the needs of the district at this point in providing all of those services. We have quite a few vacancies available, but we do check the invoices to see where we are. We also double check with HR to make sure that we are looking at positions as they open up and come in for new students that may require services based on their IEP. The ICRON is for our students that are in their 5th year, so their workforce, and for our students who are 11th and 12th graders in a work academy. So we have filled all of those positions. Currently, those students are all on track with their IRCs and graduation to graduate on time if they are 11th and 12th grader. And the students that are in the 5th year program are all on track to graduate after their 5th year program with a stronger base in employment, if not being employed. It's a little early for employment yet for them.
Thank you, Dr. Hall.
I do want to make a note that as Dr. Hall and I were working through a lot of these KPIs at the beginning of the year and identifying what the impact of a lot of these services were, the first impact we wanted to identify, Jen kind of mentioned it and we'll piggyback off of it, was getting these positions filled and looking at the ability to use these vendors to fill these positions. Because as you can see on some of these, I think paras and nurses, we have like multiple contracts to find different services. So it's finding the vendor that can fill those vacancies. And what we wanted to talk about was the ramping up into next year about what that actual student impact is. So I did want to make a note there that Dr. Hall and I will be working on what is the impact of the kid having a nurse in the school? Like, what is that? And that kind of talks about what you were talking about earlier, Dr. Moffitt, of the grades are going up, but what are all those impacts and what are all those factors that are going into those? So I think there is great opportunity in these contracts, especially to see what that student impact is. Anything else you would like to add for us, Dr. Hall?
I don't think so, Cody, unless there's any questions.
So I have questions. How many positions are unfilled? And because I'm looking at how many students let me ask the question. Are the unfilled positions impacting the learning of the students? So, i.e., are those students not able to come to school because there is no medical professional there? That's my first question. And what is that number? And then another question that I have is, if the vendors cannot fulfill the vacancies, I'm wondering why maybe we need to, I'm trying to say it as nicely as I can, but if there's problems filling vacancies with a vendor, then perhaps we need to either look at other vendors, or is it cost efficient to hire those positions in-house? Again, going back to the fact that some kids cannot attend classes because there's no medical professional. So I'm a little concerned about that. How many positions are unfilled is my first question. Are those positions necessary for that student to attend school, which impacts their learning? And then what vendors are we using what's the percentage of vacancies with vendors?
So
The vendors that we're
currently,
using. Say again, I'm sorry.
So if you look at the LPNs, currently there are 3 vacancies. Those are preschool students. We have interviews for 2 LPNs on Monday that hopefully we'll be able to fill those. These students are just able to attend preschool. They are now 3 years old or over, so they can attend preschool. They cannot attend until we get an LPN in place for them. So we work with the preschool department to make sure if a student is coming in during an evaluation that we get a heads up in the first place if the student may need nursing services, so we can start ahead of time looking for those positions to get filled. We have been fairly successful with the LPNs. The paras is a different situation. So at the beginning of the year, we had about 80 para vacancies. We continue to always try to fill those vacancies in-house. We also are doing some targeted PD and have done targeted PD for the paraprofessionals who are working with our students with disabilities. Those paraprofessionals are assigned based on the student's IEP needs. The student still comes to school, but the IEP in full is not being implemented because there is no paraprofessional with the student. So in some cases, we have managers that go out and assist in the classrooms to help in certain situations. It all depends on the individual student. The need is higher than what the agencies are able to provide.
So when you said that we had 80 vacancies, is that 80 students that can't be serviced?
So there were 80 one-on-one vacancies at the beginning of the year. I'd have to check. It changes every other week. It changes on how many we have. So for example, today, I know there was an IEP that went through where someone just approved, the IEP team approved and agreed for a student to have a one-on-one paraprofessional. So those positions go through the process they're supposed to, and then we work with HR and school teams to hire. The student does come to school though, in those situations.
We're just not in compliance. Is that
Correct.
how that works?
Correct.
And how many of the agencies that we use are not able to 100% fill our needs?
So we only have the contracts with the two vendors, Western and Cross Country. And those two vendors are not able to fulfill the need that we have. Our demand is greater than what they have. They keep looking and are trying.
So just one more question. I have 100 questions for you, but I'll ask one more. So on average, how many days would you say we're not in compliance with regard to being able to fulfill the medical needs of, on average, for let's just say first semester, since we're in first semester?
For LPNs, I can get that information for you. We do track it and see if the students are not in and how many days they miss. So I can get that information for you from first semester.
Okay, and I'd actually love, like Jen's suggestion, to see the academic impact to those students, attendance as well, and any other demographic information too. So, but thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'll just add one little thought on this, and this is general issue with nursing right now is that there is a shortage of nurses. It's the world of part of the problem. I think this is also a reason why building relationships for like nursing programs where students, maybe our students who are doing the health career tech areas who then can go into schools to get their degree and then come back and work with the district, may be a great way to create pipelines as we think about the next kind of a world of building up in the district. I think the issue though, and that probably you certainly can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I think part of the issue is just that there is so much need everywhere, and that every agency is also trying to meet their needs to get staffing at places for everywhere. That you know, in the days of where you would have 5 or 6 folks who might be sitting out, I distinctly remember when we started doing, or not when we started doing, when I worked here, when they were doing paras to work with the IEPs. The issue was always that you would have like one para who would work one day here with one student, another day with another student, and it was really hard to figure out, you know, like when that para decided not to show up, what you did, because you already had a plan in place. And now it's like the question may be, do you have enough paras to even do like partial day here, partial day there? It just may not be the same problems that we had in the past. Is that right, Dr. Hall?
That would be accurate.
So again, I think I applaud the work that you all are doing to putting together some of these numbers to get us a better understanding. I also think it's important to understand that the LPN part is actually with our younger preschool kids more so than some of our older kids. But again, I think this is another way we can think about as we look at our budget, where are ways that we can rethink how we do certain things or how we utilize certain roles to make sure that we can get staffing that's necessary to support our students with disabilities. To keep us moving here, Cole.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hall. So our next section is school culture and safety. Sorry, I had a tongue twister there. Here, I think there was only 2 contracts listed, $1.1 million value. Both are vendors that identify as either locally owned, minority owned, women owned, or a combination. This first one here on this one is the Yonder bags. So the KPI for the Yonder bags was first, we want to make sure they were delivered on the first day of school. But second, during the contract term, they want to see a decrease in cell phone usage. What I would like to see here, where we're going to pry a little deeper, is get that actual number to see what that cell phone usage was, or if we can track that to see and make sure that these Yonder bags are performing the way they're supposed to and doing that. So,
and just again, Cody, I think one I think we can continuously keep working with folks to do is to add the idea that we, in theory, say we want less cell phone usage because then we would see an academic growth as a result, not just because we don't want people using cell phones. But I mean, it's just the reality is that the thought process is that kids will be more focused in class and that their academic results will go up. And I think it was even what we argued about Hughes is that we saw some growth in academic results with the institution of it.
Teaching the academic side of the house on real key performance indicators and the impact on instruction or something has been a longer challenge than it would be for a regular business unit who's used to thinking that way. So Cody's done an incredible job teaching.
Mhm.
And as they learn and get settled, they get to the next level and then the next level. So he keeps diving deeper.
Well, and the truth is that KPIs are not you don't stand at the same KPI for the rest of the time, right? So the first KPI might be, we just need to decrease cell phone usage. The next KPI might say, now that we decrease cell phone usage, how are we seeing on academic results? Or how are we seeing on these next steps along the way? And so I think it's been great work. But we've gotten now, everybody has a Z on their pouch. Now, are we seeing anything coming from that? Stephanie, did you have something?
I was just going to add too, I remember when we were talking about Hughes, another indicator was a decrease in discipline as well. So I don't know if that's been tracked, but that would have an impact on academics and others.
Some type of, the connection up to the academic results, because again, I think there are things we would see in that first year of everybody having it that were the pitfalls, right? So like, how do you use it? How do you implement it? How well are we using it? How efficiently are we keeping track of when people don't follow it? Myriad of other things, but perfect.
It's like FY25 was the training wheels year. Now the training wheels are coming off and we're going to start doing deep dives and actually have to provide those numbers. So this should be fun going forward.
Right.
Depends on what your description of fun is. So next one would be the talent department budgets. So here we had about $9 million in contract value, 83% with the vendor minority identification. And then there's some updates on there. I think that information is still forthcoming. I'll have that information added into the working document when it gets to me. And finally, we have the treasurer's office. There was 2 contracts here, and I will hand it over to my friends across the table to talk about that contract.
So the first one is PowerSchool, and that's the software license for AlloView, which is our budget building software. We have 374 users. So what's 243,000 by? You do the math. But we're very pleased with the software in terms of what it provides for us. It's incredibly helpful to us who have to consolidate the budget, because the end users actually enter their data and they can drill down to certain, like instead of just having one line of professional services, they can do sublines for each contract that they have or intend to spend money on. And we can tag it to a strategy or an investment bucket so that we can report out, this is what we're investing in. So, but did you get a cost?
$650 per user.
Per user. So we're expanding our users to the ILT chairs and LSDMC chairs so that they can view and upload their sign off on the budgets and stuff like that.
It has been really helpful with, building out staffing formulas and getting those things recorded somewhere, and just a lot of nice improvements from where we were.
Yeah, so when Jeremy does the student projections, we drop those numbers in by school by grade, and it spits out the staffing formulas for us. And then we just have to look for anomalies and adjustments. So
I think that concludes the contract section. Are there any additional questions at this time?
No, see, none. Good job.
I feel like I said this every meeting, but I'll do it real quick. It's nice to see how far this has come. I think my first year on the board, I was in the finance committee, remembering the last meeting of the year from that year also. Just a lot of really good work, system visibility. I want to say thank you, sir.
we're
Sorry that I'm late.
we're really forging new territory, because I haven't seen another district that does this kind of work, at least in a systemic way. And so we're really forging new territory.
I mean, again, for larger districts, and again, we're in the smaller end of the larger district world, but in the larger districts, I know this has been an issue for trying to figure out how you efficiently do some of your services and resources, and how do you make sure that you're not just adding dollars onto dollars you're already spending, come up with new ways. I think that was one of the conversation points to give Treasurer Wagner a little credit here. One of the big points when we did the presentation at the Council of Executive Goals training, and that one of the things people were talking to me about afterwards was the idea of, like, you guys talk to people about all these things, like you guys have conversations about how is this investment or ROI, and like and even some of the other presentations and some of the things for folks to talk about with regards to benefits, regards to other things that they're doing. They've had a really hard time trying to communicate that to the public of why this is a thing they needed to do. I think we're in a much better position because of the work we've done on a lot of this work. So I appreciate all of the efforts there. And again, continue to look forward to seeing how these things evolve as we go forward.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. The next thing we were gonna hit is before we move into another area was the Community Reinvestment Act agreements.
Yep, next slide, please, Rob. Just one for this time around, so it's fairly large one, but it'll be for approval on the 6th. This is actually Fourth and Walnut. The Fourth and Walnut Tower is what this represents, so. But a nice chunk of annual revenue for us. So.
And then I know Lauren has stepped out, but we
Well, we have the banking thing next, right?
We do.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? It's the policies or next one.
No, the QI team report.
QI
that we
team,
came in,
yeah.
We kind of went out of order. It's
Yeah,
David,
QI team.
we're celebrating David today because he has done an incredible job.
Well, yes, while Rob pulls that up, yes, we are celebrating David Mana today across the way there. He's been with us for a while, just a great employee, just gets a ton of stuff done and has really cleaned up a lot of things. So it's a little different for the other QI presentations. Usually there's a kind of a formal QI team. But one thing that we realize is QI tools we use are embedded across a lot of other folks. I mean, we had a meeting yesterday, Jen and I can tell you with, other folks, and you could just see like using those same QI tools, test of change and, digging in and finding root causes and stuff. And so, yeah, so if you go to the next slide, Rob. So 3 things we talked about today that we never talk about. I don't think we've ever talked about here, but they are critical to what we do. There's obviously the bank account reconciliation, and then unapplied cash is another part of that, and then unclaimed funds, which we do talk about annually here. So, but again, big shout out to David Mana, who does a ton of this work every day. And then also, Ben Heckert, Joseph Porter, and Mr. Ashley are also involved in different spots. So share the praise there. Next slide, please. So just so you know, bank reconciliation is our process of matching what's on the financial system books to what's actually in our bank accounts. And it's basically like every month you should balance your checkbook at home. Not that I don't know if people still do that. I mean, we still do it. I don't know that everyone does. But it's a little more complicated at our level. I mean, you have to look at our outstanding AP checks, our outstanding payroll checks. ACH transactions have a posting date that doesn't always match, when the thing was posted in the system. There's some lag there. I mean, one thing people don't realize, just high level, for us to for you to get your paycheck on Friday, we have to have that file of all the amounts to our bank by Wednesday. So it's just a little thing people don't realize, but your payroll's done on Wednesday to be paid on Friday. So yep,
Just
go ahead.
the number of transactions that get processed through the bank account is centrally, we're paying 6,000 paychecks a pay period. So 12,000 a month, and then several hundred vendor payments. But he also has to deal with every single cash transaction from each school every day. And that's thousands and thousands of transactions that flow through those accounts.
It is. And if you remember, we do fund accounting. We do fund accounting. So there's 50 funds that these transactions could be in. And we have 16 different bank accounts. So it's not like we have a checking and a savings. We have 16 different bank accounts. So
Get it, he needs more money.
Upgrade.
Next slide, Rob. So one of the things we do is track our variance between our GL system and our bank accounts. Happy to say our variance is always, we have more money in the bank than we have in our GL, which is good, right? That's a very good thing. And these tracked for the last year, we've been everywhere from $53 up to $670. Those were some 670 is kind of the highest level, and that was right when we implemented the new Focus AR system. So how we bring fees in at the schools. So I think that's went down, and I think we were at $200 last month. Is that right?
And when I took over the department, that variance was over $5 million. And so that's the success that David's had.
I wasn't going to say that, but okay. Yeah, we have
Significantly better than my checkbook.
It is significantly better. And so to give you an idea, our variance is 0 0.000225% of the total account. So like it's a rounding error, but
Thank you, appreciate it.
all right. So, but not only does he, but wait, there's more. Not only does he do that. All right, next slide. Is a thing that we call unapplied cash. And unapplied cash is, and Jen said, like we get lots of payments from the schools. We also get lots of just checks that show up or ACH that show up in our accounts. And it's not always obvious where they're from. And so part of the unapplied cash process is figuring out, what $100 check is for and whose account that should get applied to. And so David's part of the team. The AR team also works this because we put the money in the bank to follow our policies, to follow ORC. And then we do a journal entry to put it in the right GL account. So that school or that department has the funds to spend. If you hit the next slide, Rob, you can see some significant decreases here, especially since like November last year. We've really worked hard to knock these numbers down. And it really helps the schools. The school gets a donation for $500. We do this, that means they can see it in their budget. That means they can spend it, for the students. So it's really important that we get those funds moved over. And then Rob, if you'll go forward, final one we've talked about before is unclaimed funds. So these are checks or payments we've issued that never were cashed. Mostly payroll, some vendors, and we continue to look to reach out to folks. We use whatever information we can find. A lot of times we just don't have good contact information. Part of the reason they didn't cash the check is someone moved, There is on our website, if you go to the CPS main website, go to financial information, there is a link there for unclaimed funds. If anyone listening wants to look up to see if they have money, if we owe this money, they can look up, and there's a button they can apply to get that money, to fill out basically a claim request. Thank you, Rob. Rob was on it today. I appreciate it. So please do that. And then obviously we reissue checks. I mean, pretty standard. After 90 days, most checks go stale. The bank won't cash them, and so we'll reissue them to you. And if you get the next slide here, you can see, I put a trend line on this one. You can see this numbers went way down. And part of that was the work of this committee. I think a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, we had a real discussion about it. We created a procedure where things over a certain age could then be put back to the general fund. And we also did kind of a blitz, and I think we picked up a lot of payments there. So all in all, some great work that we don't ever talk about, but I thought this would be a good opportunity to do so and praise the people who are doing this kind of behind the scenes work.
All right. Well, again, we will keep praising David. I'm sad that you just now brought David to us to praise. But, any questions from board members? Dr. Mock?
So David, you get a raise and you get a raise for sure. But that's just my Oprah interpretation for sure. Unclaimed funds. If you don't know that you have unclaimed funds, do we publish this with the county? The county does that unclaimed funds things. Is it free for us to publish it there just to say that they have money at Cincinnati Public? And I'm thinking of one of Good Morning America, or somebody does this show where they go around and they tell people, hey, you've got this money in this state. Do we do that? Do we advertise it outside of just us? Because if you don't know, then you don't know.
So we don't. We tried one time to give it to the state, and the state said we don't want it, and they gave it back to us.
I mean, I'm not talking about
because
the
it's
money.
a state database that a lot of a lot of companies forward money to, and then it's on the state search. And we tried.
Well, I'm not talking about giving them the money as much as I am. I've done it before for myself, and it directed me to the organization that I needed to go to. So even if it's just to list it that this person has funds, I'm not saying that we take their money out. I'm saying that we keep the money, let it earn interest, but announce that we have monies there. I'm just thinking, what method do we have to notify the public or former employees that there are unclaimed funds if they don't know that there are unclaimed funds?
Happy to look into that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And can I add something quick?
Sure.
So the good news is the 45,000, that's all old money. So for the last, I think, 2 years, there have not been any new monies, the unclaimed funds. So we have been, it's more like a campaign with me and Tracy Moore and payroll, just every month, just reaching out to them, telling them, it's usually a prison call when you call someone and tell them, I have money for you.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But the most important, I want to thank Jen, Mike, and Joseph, for the support. I truly do love what I do. So thank you.
Thank you.
I know the unclaimed funds was a thing that, like, at least my first year on this committee, we talked about in large part because the ones that were there were not like a month or two old. Like, these were substantially old, that we were having to reissue checks like second or third time on some of these things. And so I think the fact, to your last point there, the fact that we are not seeing this in, we're seeing next to none, if any, that we are having to address as new. That this is mostly the remaining stragglers who, at some point, we'll be able to say, those were no longer existing as unclaimed funds, and those are now claimed by us. It is important. I think the one for me, though, and this is one that we had a discussion on, and unfortunately the state changed our pathway on this, but the unassigned cash or the unapplied cash. Like, I think some of this is stemming from checks that we receive, but I think also some of this stems from we have to maintain this ability to accept cash and accept payments in a way that is not electronically efficient. And so it was the thing that we talked about in the audit committee. It was the thing that we talked about in this committee about the wanting to move to a more digital system and digital method of banking, because paying by electronically is so much easier to track and manage and that kind of deal. And then if someone pays on Friday and it's logged on Tuesday, but the cash is in the account on Friday, or the check comes in on Monday and no one tells you what the check is for until Friday, it creates these little cases where, how do we process, what are we getting funds for? So I think, again, the fact that you all are seeing that drop and kind of maintaining a pretty fair amount is testament to the hard work you're doing, but also still maybe more testament to the conversation that we continue to have to keep having about how do we manage these things in a great way. We talk about this in audit committee at times about, like, if you have a system in place and we can actually say whether or not the system's working. I think unfortunately we had a system and then the state said no. So we have gone back and revamping how that worked, but it looks like it's having good results so far.
So the AR team is working really hard at converting people from checks and cash. And that's one of their monthly KPIs that they review, is all the transactions they got, how many came in in cash versus ACH. Because the more cash you handle, the more opportunity there is for financial risk. And so, yes, thank you, state, for making our job harder.
Any other comments? Cool. Thanks. All right, good work.
Yes.
I see that our chief audit executive is now in the building. So we will transition over to them. I think the first thing, and Lauren, I'll turn it over to you to introduce it, but I think the first thing we have on the is a couple of resolutions.
So good morning, almost afternoon, everyone. Apologize for our team's tardiness. We were running late from another meeting, but I wanted to take a moment, since we did miss introductions, to introduce, of course, myself. I'm Lauren Roberts, and I'm the Chief Audit Executive. And I have my internal audit team here with me, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm sorry, a little sick. Emma Mueller, internal audit supervisor.
Everybody leaned away from her.
Isaac Karn, internal audit supervisor.
Wonderful. So forgive me, I think I have to angle myself a little with the microphone. We were asked to come today and have this wonderful opportunity to share a bit of information about internal audit and the work that we do. This may be a bit of a recap for those who saw this presentation at our September board meeting, where we had the opportunity to inform the public as well as members of the board and community about internal audit. And then we also will go through our audit committee dashboard that we shared at our December audit committee meeting, kind of a consolidated version of both of those items. And of course, as Chair Craig just mentioned, the resolutions that are coming before the Finance Committee as well. So perhaps, so we don't forget, we start with those resolutions because I can see myself moving right along. So our first resolution that we have before you, these are drafted with the anticipation of moving to the January board meeting, of course, but they are for our chair and vice chair positions for the audit committee. So the first is Dan Holthouse continuing as chair for another year. And we are fortunate to receive a interest from Clarice Warner, a member who has now been approved by the audit committee as vice chair. And then our second resolution is for another 3-year term for member Paul Kitzmiller. So I submit these for your review, consideration, and hopeful approval.
And again, these were two folks who, for the vice chair and the chair, there was tremendous support within the audit committee for them. And so wanted to make sure that it comes to us so that if there's any concerns or questions from board members. Otherwise, I think the next step is for it to go to the full board for the approval in our January meeting. Again, Dan's returning. And I will say one thing, Dan wanted to make sure that there was consistency in leadership on the audit committee, because I think it was important for him to not have a full turnover of the audit committee leadership team. So that was part of the reason he chose to accept the nomination to remain. And we also want to thank, and now I'm blanking on names now, but Liz Guthridge for her being the vice chair for this last year. And again, she remains on the committee, but decided she wanted to take a little bit of a step back. So any questions or concerns about the resolutions? No. All right.
Thank you. And do we need to do a motion, second roll call, or, an unanimous vote from a procedural standpoint?
I don't believe so for this. I think we would do that at the at policy or at the board meeting.
Yeah, it'll move, I think, to the board meeting.
At the board meeting, yeah.
Yep. Perfect. Great. Well, thank you so much. Wonderful. So I will get into a brief conversation about internal audit, and I'm happy to expand. And of course, I've got the team with me so we can dig deeper into any aspects of interest. But to begin, for the public's edification and context, start with what is internal audit. So our job as internal auditors is to provide independent and objective assurance and feedback to add value and improve the value through the organization. As a reminder, we do have an audit committee and internal audit charter that are board policies that grant us the authority to do this work and have unfettered access to all of the resources and management team. And we work in partnership with those throughout the organization to achieve these goals. So just to briefly touch on organizational structure for those who may not be familiar, I am a direct report to the Board of Education. We also functionally report to our audit committee, which is comprised of our 3 finance committee members and 10 members of the community who volunteer their time, as we just mentioned, through our appointment process as members and, of course, as chairs and vice chairs. So we report to the audit committee on a bi-monthly basis, providing updates regarding our plan, the assessment of risk in our annual risk assessment process, which is what results in the plan. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail in just a moment. So jumping to the impact of internal audit, what's our purpose? We hope to increase the operational efficiency of our organization, enhance the compliance and accountability throughout our organization and with our community, and promote the stakeholder confidence in CPS. So that is a very consolidated version of our September 23rd presentation. If you're interested in those full deck of slides, that is available on board docs for that September 23rd meeting. But where we wanted to spend a little bit more of our time and focus today is on our audit committee dashboard. So for those of you who attend our audit committee meetings, you may be very familiar with this tool. However, for those who are not, we have developed this dashboard as a communication method to our audit committee and public stakeholders to say what kind of work is being done by internal audit and in partnership with management. So the top is more administrative of sorts. It provides information for our audit committee members. However, the rest of this document provides notable information for everyone. The first you'll see is our external audit process. We partner with the entire organization and request that they send internal audit, any external audits that are in progress and ongoing. So our management teams are aware, as well as our board audit committee and finance committee are aware of what external audits are taking place. So right now we are well underway with our fiscal 24 financial audit, led and overseen by our treasurer's office and coordinated in the details, I'm sure, with Mr. Kevin Ashley. So lots of work being done there and more information to come as that concludes. So to step into the internal audit plan, how our audit cycle functions for those, again, who may not work in this daily. Every year, we develop a full organizational risk assessment. This work is typically done in the May and June timeframe, with the results then being our plan for the year. So how we select things are based on a multitude of factors, such as organizational risks, reputational risks, and think of a risk as what can go wrong, also as what's an opportunity we have to take advantage of some improvements and to ensure that those things don't occur. So our plan every year is approved during the summer months, either at our June, July, or August audit committee meeting, and then we get to work on those projects. So right now we are about at the midpoint of the year, and fortunately we see we're about 40% of the way. We explained to our audit committee that you'll see the number of tasks kind of ebb and flow as we get into our projects. Those numbers will go up, and then they will start to move through into the completed state. So we're making great progress through our projects this year. To dive into just a little bit more detail, there are numerous categories of projects. So we perform assurance work, which are what you think of when you hear audit. It's an audit report that we present at the end. It's based on a set of criteria, a set of data, and we measure against that data against that criteria. So we have numerous projects that are in progress now, as you can see listed. The other set of projects that we do are advisory. So that is more consulting in nature. It does not result in a report at the end. However, we do sometimes provide a summary of what was accomplished. But what's notable about this work is it's management-led, meaning a management team or administrative team has a goal in mind, and we partner with them to provide our feedback and insights as an independent source. So we have our projects, of course, listed there that we're currently working through. And the next one is follow-up. So these are projects that have historically already been audited by our team. And as we get to the bottom here, we'll talk about our tracking. But once things, recommendations rather, are marked as complete or fully addressed and implemented by management, we can come back and do a follow-up to say, are we seeing the data and the results as we anticipate, and are those initial issues resolved? And then finally, we have some portions that are focused on our team's development around internal audit development, such as implementing the Institute of Internal Auditors standards. That is an overarching multi-year goal where we are aiming to obtain a clean peer review that says our internal audit team functions and operates to the standards that are set by our industry. So that concludes the aspects of our fiscal 25 plan, the type of work that we perform. And then the final area that I'll just briefly note are the past recommendations. I touched on that just a moment ago, but essentially what we have developed over the past few years is a process of accountability, oversight, and management reporting that lets us see what past recommendations have been completed, what have met their due date, and perhaps those that have not yet been completed by the due date established by management. So one thing that was discussed at the most recent audit committee meeting were the past due recommendations and what are our next steps. So fortunately, since December 11th, we've had further conversations with management as we are still developing this process. This is a new iteration. And so we have developed a plan to to work with management to say, what is our escalation process? So we will bring that to our next audit committee meeting. We want to ensure that it's a collaborative approach. We're all learning from this new method of tracking. So we never want audit to be punitive. However, we do want it to show accountability and follow through. So one question that was specific from audit committee was to benefits. So we have a meeting scheduled in early January with the benefits team. And speaking with Ms. Julia Indalacio, our goal is to embed internal audit into their processes. So as they say, we are nearly complete, we've developed a process, we anticipate the data has improved. We want to come in, show them how we tested it historically or how we would test it if we were to come in for a follow-up audit, help them have the tools necessary to self-validate, and we can provide a little oversight and guidance there. So when they say we are good to go for follow-up audit, we can anticipate those results being hopefully very positive. So just wanted to share those brief updates since our December 11th meeting, and really appreciate management team, treasurer's office, and superintendent as the other dual reports to the board, and everyone up below and within their teams has been very supportive of this work. So I think we're making great progress, and I anticipate those past due items, resolving themselves hopefully by the February meeting. So that was hopefully my consolidated, what is internal audit? What do we do in a year and so on, but happy to expand or answer any questions.
No, thank you, Lauren. And again, I think part of the reason we had this, want to have this conversation is that the entire board membership of the committee here is also on the internal audit. And so we wanted to make sure that we're providing an update through here as well to just acknowledge the work that's being done. This has also been a very big transition year in the way internal audit has operated in some ways, because we recognize, have you go out and audit a million things, and some of them being able to be audited and some of them things not, wasn't necessarily the most efficient use of the time. And so Lauren and her team have really worked hard to kind of rethink and rework through how they are doing audits, and what I think the three categories, right, that has been a tremendous helpful work to administration and some of the work also the treasurer's office has been doing. So appreciate it. Any other, Dr. Moffitt?
So I just want to say to your team that's small but mighty, good job and congratulations, because this is relatively new. When I first got on the board, I didn't see the dashboard. So this is a lot of work, a lot of hard work, but to the public, it's actually just 150 degrees more transparency, better, efficient data. I do want to go up a little bit, Rob, if you can go up just a little bit to demonstrate that, just a little bit, right above this section, right there. So this is with regard to incomplete recommendations. If we were to look at, and I was trying to make sure that I saw, you mentioned that, hey, you know what? It gets bigger and then it gets smaller. But this is a testament. The number is bigger, but it's a testament to how efficient you all are working with our departments and how you are, again, holding us accountable to running the district more efficiently. So that might look like it's a huge number, but it's demonstrating that you all are integrating more efficiently within the district and doing really, really good work. So kudos to you and your small but mighty team. But you guys don't get enough. I think audit is not sexy, and it could be a little off-putting to some people.
Audit ain't sexy.
I mean, some people just run away from it. Like, oh my God, math and numbers. No, but it's really, really helped me as a board member, and I can speak for myself, to understand the numbers, to tie that into being fiscally responsible and efficient. And I'm holding all of our departments accountable. So I'm glad to hear that you all are immersing yourselves into the process so that it's not just a punitive thing. It's hey, we're really trying to help you get better. Again, going back to efficiency. So thank you to that. And then thank you to our other teams too, because they all tie together. Money, academics, auditing, it's all a big, it really can be a little sexy. So thank you for all you do.
So I just wanted to say that first, the Lauren's team, they have to overcome the fear with departments that they do a really good job of coming alongside the department instead of a gotcha and scaring people. But what's easy to do is once their audit is done and they have a set of recommendations, we agree with them, they're great recommendations, but people always feel like it's above and beyond their already day-to-day work. And so it's easy to set it aside and then forget about it. So what we've done is, one is we've started writing them into people's goals and their evaluations so that we make sure they get attention. Two, we do a monthly review of all of our KPIs, and we've added the incomplete measures to that monthly review. And then we also took some of those recommendations and created QI teams around them. So it's being addressed in different ways and it's having a very positive impact. Thank you.
Just a good
Yeah.
way to have it.
So again, thank you for all the hard work. You all are welcome to stay if you'd like, although I realize Emma already said she feels bad. The one other little quick update that if you didn't sit through audit committee, you didn't learn, is that we have two big announcements that'll be coming
Yes.
throughout this next year from members of our audit team here. Yeah, one of them who has this whole thing of like, she decided she was gonna get married and stuff. And then another person said, hey, there's not enough of me in the world. I want to bring another life into it.
Yeah. And then Isaac passed the CPA exam.
And then I said, I want to be smarter, so I'm gonna pass. So all kinds of big accomplishments going on in audit.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
So yeah, bring it back to Stephanie now. This is why she's here. We will go back to now.
Policies.
Policies. So we broke them up into a couple different categories of these. And so first are a couple of policies that we've talked about this committee. The next group is like a set of policies that we're thinking about and proposing to be further discussed. So if we want to start,
Right, so the first two have been introduced and now we're just gonna go into detail so we can decide whether to move them on or not. And then the last three are new introductions, so just something to think about. Go ahead, Mike.
Sure. Rob, can you go to the cash balances slide, please? So this is the follow-up. We brought this up a couple months ago, the idea of having a cash balances policy. It's slide 44, Rob. Look at.
There you go.
All right, so part of what we did, the research, is we looked at other districts around the state, as well as ASBO had a kind of white paper on cash balance policies. All of them have basically the same four main parts, and so we kind of tried to break it out that way in the slide. So all of them have a goal. All of them have a test. So when do you look to see if you're meeting that goal? All of these policies have an action required, and then one thing we're going to talk about is an implementation period. So we're proposing our goal would be to have 60 days of unencumbered cash as a balance, and we would look at the current fiscal year and the two subsequent fiscal years, which nicely matches up with our 5-year forecast. And so we would also report this at the 5-year forecast in May and November. And if you remember from the presentation, there's a nice slide that's built into the slide deck already that shows your days of cash on hand going forward. So it would be kind of a takeoff of that. Actions required are pretty similar across the board. It's generally that the treasurer and superintendent create a plan on how we get from our current cash balance to our target cash balance. And then obviously present that to the board for approval. Those are pretty standard. The one thing, obviously, if you look at the 5-year forecast, we're nowhere close to where 60 days at this point. And so one thing we'd want to talk about is an implementation period, right? I mean, this is not something you can handle in one year. But we talked about, reserving a portion of each year's revenue to increase cash balances, so have a set aside. And then also, if there's significant unexpected revenue, to set some of that aside. Like an example I would use would be the county auditor fees that we got back. That was unanticipated 3.9 million. So we could say, hey, before we spend this on other things, let's reserve some of it for cash. If you go to the next slide, Rob. So this is just an example using current numbers. So using 5-year forecast numbers. If you remember from the presentation, we had 35 days of cash available at the end of the second year. 60 days of cash would require us to have about $104 million available. It's about $1.74 million a day based on 365 days. And so to get to the target balance, just an example, we said we want to get there in 5 years, we'd have to set aside around $12 million a year to do so. And obviously, there's a lot of other paths to go, but I think that's a good place to start the conversation. Jen, did you want to add anything?
I was just gonna say, and later in a few minutes, I'll show you the impact on the budget target and how this impacts the budget target.
I think there's one more slide on the cash balances also. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the third slide is just other districts, policies. So in our research, we just put them up there so you can kind of see what other folks are doing and how long they've been out there, so.
So this is a topic that we've been discussing for a few, well, not a few months, but basically the entire year, if not going back into last year. Just something to be paying attention to as well, as because we will, in theory, have a larger amount of cash on hand with whatever we decide to do from a levy perspective in a couple years, not this year or next year, but it is something for us to be thinking about because, again, depending on when things get paid.
Right, so we need feedback on the 60 days, whether that's is acceptable to the board, and is a 5-year implementation plan acceptable? Is 60 days, $100 million off the top of our $624 million revenue next year would make for a significant budget cut that we're already facing. So, I don't, is 60 days seems to be the common standard. So is that appropriate to just leave in there?
Board thoughts? Ben?
First of all, great topic. And thank you for the chance to talk about it together. 60 days is, and I apologize if I missed this earlier, what percent is that of our, like, to have 60 days? I guess I could do the math, right?
It's like
That's
1/6.
2 months.
It's like, yeah, it's like 1/6, yeah.
About 18%. Is that?
I'm gonna
I
do
think that's
that.
right, yeah, it's close.
Okay. So that seems like a minimum to me.
Yes.
You know, like with
Yes.
18%, you know,
Yes.
at my old job, it was 35%.
Right.
You know, like that you needed to have
It's-
fundraise 35% extra.
It's
Um,
16.7%.
16.7. I was pretty close. Or you're all just being very nice to me, so. But yeah, so I on the, so from my perspective, is it good to have a policy about this? Yes. Where I have some questions, is this high enough? You know, should it be, and like, maybe it takes us longer to get there, but like, should it be higher than, because I was looking at the districts and I recognize that they're close by to us. So that might make them good examples, but just because they're nearby doesn't mean that they're great, you know, they might be great. I think we should benchmark against whoever's best at this, you know, and my answer to who's best at this would be like, who's got the strongest student outcomes. And so we figure out like, well, who's, or maybe it's the nexus of student outcomes and financial strength, you know? So but you know, I don't want to create extra work. But I'm trying to figure out what should the bar be, but then wherever we land on that, I think my bigger concern is, you know, I've certainly seen our board ignore board policy before. It's easy to do. I think it's going to be particularly easy to do here because it's never easy to get to our budget.
There's always pressure to spend cash, right? Yeah,
Absolutely.
so, but you do have an approved resolution that you will not overspend your annual revenues, over budget your annual revenues. For that reason, we can't go any lower in cash than we are. We need to start building back our reserve.
I'm just saying that my worry is we will blow right through those resolutions, you know, despite the fact that we've had. And so one idea that you might play with is, what if the policy included some, if the board doesn't do this, here is blank, what's going to happen in the budget. You know, and so you create Congress did this once.
yeah.
During the Obama administration.
Yeah.
Like either you pass a budget or there's going to be like a 10% across the board cut, you know, and it created a forcing mechanism to force people to come to an agreement that I don't think would have been there otherwise. And so I'm, you know, you'd have to make it bad, so that like whatever the board could get to would be better. But I just wanted to see what people thought about that idea.
So one of the hammers, so to speak, for that is the treasurer can refuse to certify the budget.
Yeah,
Which
but
it'd take a really strong treasurer to do that.
That's what anybody's gonna want to keep their job, you know. I think you have to target the pain on the board members.
Yes.
Because I think that's the group that's gonna want to spend the money rather than make the hard decision.
Okay, we'll look into that.
And if you'd like a board member to help propose that so that it's coming from a board member and not from you all.
Right.
Like, I'm happy to play that role. Like, I just think
Okay.
we just passed earlier this week a new evaluation policy for the superintendent. And one of the things that I really think makes it strong is it has backup rules in there. Like, if the board doesn't do blank, here's what's going to happen. So like, we have it demonstrated at least one example of having done this. And I think if we have to decide, like, is this something that really, really matters? Seems to me like it does. But if it does, I think that we should maybe try to replicate the same idea.
Well, and we have the policy chair, at least the ongoing.
Outgoing. They may never choose me.
Dr. Moffitt.
So I was thinking along the same lines. I think I'm a slightly different than my colleague in that I think that the triggers should be, because I think, well, let me back up. I think your department does a really good job of keeping the board informed. So I don't think that there would be a lack of information. I do think that it's very easy to take from, it would be very easy to take from that. Just anybody would be like, well, let's take what we're saving. But I do think that the triggers should be incremental, but kind of not necessarily that you don't certify the budget, but that things happen to the board, to the process. And so I'm more comfortable rather than saying, and forgive me, just this is my thing, rather than saying me as an employee of the board is going to do this, that the board will have to realize something. So don't put it on the treasurer, but put it on that if we don't make this, for instance, just as a very bad example, but this is the only one I can think of quickly. If the monthly payment is not made, then this awareness goes up to the board and this triggers something, not you doing that.
So what will happen is when we're filing the forecast is going to look really ugly. And then we go into a series of fiscal states. And then when you get to a board takeover, then that's where the pain in the board comes in, because you stop making this, you stop being allowed to make the decisions.
Yes.
Somebody else does.
But I think that awareness needs to be to the
Yeah.
board in totality rather than the treasurer's actions.
Sure.
Not because then I can very easily see that being trickled down to the treasurer.
Right.
So I think it should be an awareness issue that the board needs to realize, hey, if this does not happen, X is going to happen for you to recognize that this doesn't matter.
Okay.
Oh, and if it happens again, then it's an increased awareness. So, but I do want to look at, I think that number is good, but I also think there needs to, for the other board members, there needs to be some comps there so that they recognize that this is not just you saying this is really comparable across the district, and then maybe even go outside of Ohio to say other urban districts that look like you and have faced X are saving this number, and maybe it's 15%, maybe it's 30%, but realistically over time, what have other districts looked at that are very similar to your situation? And I don't think you're going to be able to find that just within Ohio. I think you're going to have to find that comparable across other states, but there are districts that look like us, because I speak to some of them very regularly, and they have faced some of the same things. They don't have the state regulations, but they have some of the same demographics, and they have had to decrease their reserve and are looking at the very same thing. So I would love to see just those two things, comps across the nation with regard to similar demographics, and then I'm saying punitive, but the awareness be to the board rather than to be to the treasurer.
So we'll come back in January with that information and some recommendations, and then we'll add to the slides the penalties that the state does. You know, how you go through the stages, so that'll start. Yeah, good, thank you.
And again, I think what I'm hearing also though is I think the idea of doing 60-day, if not, so at some point, maybe even escalating in future years to a higher number, is not a bad necessary method to do it. And I think also the process of doing it over a time frame is a good plan. The one other thing I would possibly add to that thought process though is just, we are looking at this as a policy for how we get there. What happens once we're there? So like, maybe it is both the idea of getting there and then maintaining the 60-day may require certain things. If this is not done, then that yada, yada, yada kind of deal as well. So as we're adding language in about how do we get there, make sure we're adding language in about once we're there at our intended goal.
Well, and then to Mr. Lindy's point, at some point in time, we should rethink whether it's 60 days should be 70 days that way,
Yep.
right? So maintain and then grow.
And one other thing for me, what would be very most helpful is kind of how we got here. And so, again, I'm into education and awareness of everybody. And I think some of our board members do need that as well. How it wasn't that we were trying to be neglectful, but we got here very slowly and we're going to need to increase very slowly, but just the picture of how we got here
Yeah.
and then the slow process and how we improve.
I
Okay.
think the next steps, bring it back in January. And then I think what we would do from whatever the committee is at that point, we'll do from there is that if what's brought back, meets to what we're looking for, to send it to policy, which is kind of the route we do. I think the other part is just working with general counsel's office just to make sure that there's no language in there that would be any kind of problematic things from us on the legal end. But we can do that in January before that meeting. The next one.
Next slide, Rob. So hopeful we can kind of move this one to policy if possible. This is their capitalized assets policy, so this is our fixed assets. The big impetus for doing this is federal uniform guidance, which is what we have to follow for any federal funds. They changed their capitalization threshold for a fixed asset. So capitalization threshold is just how much an asset has to cost before we have to track it as a capital asset and do depreciation and stuff. They changed it from 5 to 10 grand. If we want to go up to 10 grand, which is good for us, it's less things we have to track and depreciate. We have to change our policy. So it's either if your number's lower, it goes by your number. If you raise to their number, they use their number. So this just matches federal uniform guidance. That's the big change. A couple other things in there has added some language around asset tagging and that kind of process, what disposals and transfers look like. This actually helps us kind of manage those assets better. It gives people a little more, something in policy to help people go, oh yeah, this is part of the policy. Nothing really controversial. It's the same practice we've done for years. It's just that. And then the final thing is there's a review of real estate section, just changing it, really changing the wording from biannual to biennial. Biennial is the practice, but the words of the policy say biannual. So yes, as for those of you who don't know, biannual is twice a year and biennial is every 2 years. And that's an easy one that
Get word
into. It's sort of like, what is it, bi-monthly and semi-monthly? We deal with that all the time and like the payroll side of the world, which one's which. So any feedback on those?
Okay, so we can take that one to policy.
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, next one is receivables and
Is there a red line version of that,
Yes.
or are you looking for us to? Okay.
we have a red line. I'll get it over to you. Thank you, Stephanie. The next one to talk about is receivables and write-offs. So you don't actually have a receivables policy. And except for where it applies to CRAs. And so we do bill for things other than CRAs. So I think it's good to do. We took this from another urban district. So they have a nice procedure manual. We took some of the stuff from, but high level ideas, it defines what the receivables function is, and that, the board, has need to bill people for different things over time. Authorizes the treasurer to charge late fees, which again is in the CRA policy, but isn't anywhere else. But there may be other things we want to charge late fees for from time to time. And then the second part is it defines what uncollectible accounts are, and we do have some of these. The two big things are folks who owe us money who filed bankruptcy or have other legal protections, which we can't collect, but it's going to stay on our books forever until we do something. Or places where the cost of collection is greater than the amount owed. Sometimes you get to a point where the only thing you can do is file in small claims court. Sometimes the filing costs are more than what's owed, and so it kind of doesn't make sense, right? You're spending more money than you're going to receive back. And so part of this would be to authorize the treasurer to write off uncollectible accounts under $5,000, and then to have the board approve accounts over $5,000 for write-offs.
And then, so this is a new, so
This
you
would
know,
be a
again, we were
new-
talking about this is a new category of stuff. I think this is one that is important in a lot of ways because the fact we don't have one means that we don't really have a standard to how we would do it. So it's definitely great. The only thing that comes to mind in my thought process is that there are some accounts, and we saw this with how we did contracts, where you might have like one person has like 6 different things that might be under the amount for each of those individual things. They may be at different stages of when they're due. Like, would we be talking about those as each individual account or each individual
I would,
uncollectible account?
I
Or
would say any individual collectible under 5,000 versus individual collectible over 5,000. So that way you'll get the cluster as well.
okay,
It's highly unlikely that there'll be a cluster because these are typically either CRAs who aren't collected. We report those to the county and the city, and then they help do stuff. The other stuff is tuition and like employee overpayment. So if somebody leaves, then we don't, it hasn't entered in the system, so we keep paying them. Getting that money back is a challenge. And so the first thing we do is we go through an escalation routine in AR, and then it goes to a collection agency, and we use the same one that the state auditor uses. And then at some point, they declare bankruptcy, they have a legal status, and it's ridiculous for us to keep carrying that because we're never going to collect it.
yeah. So if you want an example, I didn't add this because it's people's names in it, but part of our employee overpayments and like they're aged. We have 5 folks out there, and all of them have chapter 7 bankruptcy. So the amounts they owe us are range from a minimum of $230 to about $4,500. So total of all 5 is under $10,000, but the individual accounts, the highest is $4,700.
yeah.
So would it be preferable for me to, when I get to a point to do the write-off, if I include it in the treasurer's report as that schedule?
So I think that would certainly be helpful as we think about this policy one. I guess maybe the one thing I would want to make sure that we don't have is, like, for instance, if we had a employee who also had some other reason that they were overpaid and they had some other debt, right, from something else that they shouldn't have received a payment for.
Or like inappropriate credit card charges?
Yeah, or something like we paid out for something else that, like, yes, we may have reasons that would be different in certain circumstances of why we would collect. So it gives you the authority to, but there may be still opportunities where we would not necessarily utilize this particular policy for particular reasons.
So what we can do is write into the policy, the procedure where we bring the report and discuss it at finance committee before we do act on it.
Because I mean, I think most of these, they're absolutely going to be ones that we would say this is not worth our time and trouble to try and recover. But I do think there are times where we may have to follow different procedures for different reasons that go into whether or not we want to take other actions against a person.
Yeah.
That may be very different if we say we want to do this, but we wrote off the debt anyway, so we didn't really care. But this is how we want to do
So
that action.
the policy does have some kind of protections for that. That, like, for example, you're a former employee, we write it off, you come back and want to be rehired, then we have the conversation. Same thing for vendor. Say there's a vendor, and they come back and want to be a vendor again. Well, then you're going to have to, before we're going to let you in as a vendor, we need to talk about this written off debt. And
Yeah, I mean, unless there's other thoughts from board members on this one, I think it's certainly something that we should keep on the agenda for January of next year, and then possibly move that again to policy with a little bit of the fine tuning there.
Yeah, they have copies of the red line, right?
it's linked in the slide deck.
So
too.
it'll give you a chance to read through them and ask questions. Okay.
They're all linked in the bottom of the slide. Sorry, Dr. Moffett.
Just a quick question. What do other districts do for this?
So
Is your-
this is very this is a very similar.
The way that you all have written it, like this is pretty
Mhm. Yeah.
comparable.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
talked about it at our treasure huddle.
Yeah.
It's all the Irvings.
Yeah.
That's cute.
Jen and the men.
Is it, it's cute. Is it, I don't want to say a growing problem, but is the need for this pretty significant across the Jen and men?
I don't know. It's a growing problem. I think we all have it, but a lot, and like I think everyone kind of goes through their process, and you just get these things have sat for years, and so some of it's just like
how old are those there?
Like 2021s, and probably when we went to class. And so at some point, like you either ignore it, or you say, let's get this off our books.
What's the adverse effect to it remaining on our books? I mean, obviously
It
there
just
isn't.
becomes more work for David.
Okay. So I'm just thinking like, is there a 5-year limit where it triggers something, or like what? Obviously you want it off the books, but I'm just thinking pros and cons.
Yeah, I mean, and we do our third-party collections agency still tries to collect,
But we pay them, right? So we're paying.
we,
they're going
we
to
pay
the-
them a percentage of what they get back, right?
Okay.
But that cost is passed through to the user, not us.
Okay. Okay.
So if they owed us $1,000, they would add their fee. So that person would have $1,000 plus their fee to pay
Okay.
back.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Lauren, did you have one?
Oh, yes. I'm just gonna add the auditors, like an auditor's perspective on that would be also increased accuracy of what our financials represent. So that way we aren't overstating collectibles, in fact, that we'll never collect. So I think that was already said, but just as we look at the accuracy of the numbers that we have in our systems, it's going to be more appropriate. So I think that would make a lot of sense. I think the thought process is really strong there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren.
Make
Okay.
David's life easier.
Yeah.
We do not want to we don't want to complicate you.
This is gonna be, this will forever be known as the David meeting, right?
David's end of the year, way to kick it off. Okay,
right.
thank you.
Thank you. All right, so next slide. Thank you. This is kind of a subset of this topic, but also comes in. So we wanted to have a conversation with you guys about aged student fees. And so as you know, it started this year, we moved our student information system from PowerSchool to Focus. And as a corollary to that is we moved kind of the student fee system from a system called PaySchools into Focus. Focus has a billing module, an AR module, which is nice for the parents because it's like a one-stop shop, right? So that's really good thing. Very good. The problem is we have all this data in the old PaySchool system that we need to get moved over to the Focus AR module. And it's timely now because, especially for the seniors, like senior parents are starting to think through like, okay, I got to get all my kids' stuff paid, because they're starting to think about graduation. So the schools are kind of pushing us. Jen, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so this is an unintended consequence of decentralizing financial transactions. Because up to this point, the treasurer's office don't get, other than doing the district-wide fees that we've now waived, we don't participate in the collection, the schools do that. So there's a growing balance of unpaid fees. And the unfairness of it is when they collect it as a high school, the high school keeps the money where the elementary schools lose out on the deal. Because it follows them through their academic career. And some of them, as we've been looking at the data, some of the fees are, how many people are now inactive?
Tons, I can't remember the number.
$2.5
million
million
dollars.
inactive.
Yeah, so there's $15.5 million of, and again, like, the other thing the other thing I would say is you have to realize that most of our fees get waived or reduced. I mean, part of it is a paperwork thing. Is that a lot of these students were eligible at some point for free and reduced lunch in their career. And it's basically you fill out a form and the fee gets waived, but people don't do that until they get to the end and it's like, oh, I got to get this done, so my kid can graduate. So a lot of this gets waived anyway. And you can see that through the collections. I see Michelle's nodding over there. She knows from a school perspective. So yeah, so 15.5 million seems like a huge number. Some buckets, so about 1.8 is just obsolete fee types. These are fees that were like in order to go back, we would have to try to figure out what the initial intention was. The GL codes are linked back to the Oracle system. We haven't had Oracle since 2006-14. So, we're talking some really old stuff. Another 2.5 million are fees assessed to inactive students. So these students have left the district. Obviously their fees stayed. But if they're not coming back, I don't see. And then 11.2 million is for actual current students. If you go ahead, or did you want to say something? Sorry. Okay. And then I just had a couple quick graphs here. The first one's outstanding fees by grade level. So you can see the vast majority of it's in the high schools. Or not the majority, but the most, the highest percentage in the high schools. followed, and kind of goes downhill. Obviously, if you don't pay your fees every year, by the time you get to high school, you're going to owe more money, right? It kind of makes sense. There's a little bit of preschool tuition in there, and then there's that giant inactive students thing that we talked about. And then if you go to the next slide, Rob, just another way to look at it is by due date year. So we had this kind of table of when the due date was for the fees. I don't 100% trust this data, but you can see there's a lot of old stuff out there.
The weird thing is look at 2011.
Yeah, that's crazy. What was going on?
Yeah,
there?
That's why I said I don't.
The recording.
That's what I said. I don't 100% trust this data, but you can see. And then just the final graph there is for active students or active currently. What the outstanding fees are. You can see most of them are the grade level fees, which are the fees that we chose not to collect this year. But obviously they have, up to 11 previous years of fees that have accumulated.
I think with this, and I'll get some board feedback as well, or some other board members' feedback as well, but I think some of this also ties into what we ultimately decide to do as a board with regards to fees in general. So I think both the policy with regards to how we handle aged fees, but because there still will be things that we have fees for. But then also what are our BARD policy with regards to what are things that we would have fees for? May need to be another part of that discussion model. But I want to open up to some thoughts here, Dr. Moffitt.
So I want to be real clear because I had kids back when it started this graph at 2020 or 2002 that were in school. Fees is not always just the $35 that we're collecting. It also can include damaged items. It can also include field trips. It can also include other things. And I want to make sure that we say publicly that it is not simply just the up to $35 fee. The district decided to only waive the $35 fee or up to $35 fee, but that's not the only thing that is inclusive of student fees. That needs to be clarified. And then also, I want to ask a question to Treasurer Wagner. When one of my sons was in school, he went to a Montessori school. But in high school, we had to look at the fees being paid for graduation. When you say that the high school collects the money, we had to go back to the Montessori school, elementary school principal to get those fees waived. So I don't know if there's consistency around the high school getting those fees that are collected and keeping the money. That may be the end result, but I've also heard of other parents who had to go back to the schools where the kids were for fees other than $35, not just for school fees in order to get those waived. And that particular principal wasn't even a principal, and he was like in the district someplace else. So I don't know if we can differentiate these figures to be what are school district waivable fees, the $35, and what are other fees being charged, because it's not just the $35 student fees that are represented in student fees.
Yeah, if you look at the graph, and we try to do that in the graph on the right there, the huge line, those are the $35 kind of grade level fees.
Are we on this slide?
Yeah. On this slide.
Okay.
The big bar.
The
that's
big,
$6
the big
million
bar.
is
Yeah.
is a $35
But
cumulative over the last 22 years.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. There's intercession fees that aren't paid in there. There's lost damage items. I mean, those are some significant ones.
So the board did not decide to waive all fees.
No.
So I just want to be really,
Right.
really clear, because
Right.
some people have been like, oh, I didn't know. Okay, so we don't have a balance. You do.
Yeah.
Because the fees are not just inclusive of the $35, but I'm also wondering, is there a way to notify parents prior to graduation more timely, either that be quarterly? Is that what you all are working towards? Because part of the problem, which I do feel for parents, is when you let me know in May that my son or daughter is graduating and, oh, I've got a $700 bill for fees that may or may not be the $35, that is cost prohibitive.
Right.
But if I know and I know it's there, I'm not saying that it's not there. I'm just saying that they may not be aware of it. And now we've switched the focus. So that's another layer of potential
Yeah.
confusion. Do we let them know that?
Well, to this point, this procedure is handled at the school site.
Okay.
So the process and the procedures really needs improvement. And then there's to be monthly reporting and quarterly reporting or something, and then yes, reporting onto the school. So we really need a team that figures out what's the right process to do. If the treasurer's office takes over that, then we might need resources. The collection would probably pay for that.
So
Right.
just to bring this back though to what was being offered is that we would have a policy to handle once those fees have aged.
Right.
So like, I think there is definitely a conversation around how do we notify and all those other things with regards to new fees and fees that are currently kind of sitting there, but we do have a number of fees that are also aged going back to, now like 2002, that may need to be addressed. So I think from what we want to do today is just discuss whether or not we even want to have a policy about how we handle those aged fees.
Well, my question, that was getting to my question. Sorry, I'm a little long-winded. So are we talking about in the policy potentially getting rid of the historical fees? That's what I was asking, because the fees is not, are we talking about just the fees, or are we talking about what the fee entails to potentially get rid of? So I'm asking the question about how you're requesting to structure the potential policy when there's that large number of delinquencies, and it's not just what the board decided to waive.
What we're looking for is an ability to write off what is not going to ever be collected. The
Okay.
likelihood of them, like, we're not going to go back to somebody from 2002 and collect
Yeah,
the money.
I gotcha.
So there's that, but then we need a process moving forward, right?
Okay,
That has some teeth so that you can then hold people accountable to the work,
gotcha.
and that we are more successful with managing that.
This would go away. Well, potentially.
Well, it gets a lot smaller.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Thank
Yeah.
you for.
Yeah, people will continue to not pay.
Yeah.
This is coming out of a student information system, so I don't know how accurate the information is.
Sure.
It's never been reconciled to any kind of billing on our side because we don't do
Do
that.
it, right.
The schools do it. So it's just a convoluted system that needs to be fixed.
Effort to keep us going here.
Yeah.
And I'll go really quickly to you, Lauren, but I was just gonna say, I think this is something we can certainly bring back for future conversations as
Yeah.
to what that policy looked like.
Yeah, I just was going to make a quick comment. It related back to some of the work we did through internal audit project, and I think it is one of the outstanding recommendations.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to agree. It was kind of well, here we are today. What do we want to do to improve this moving forward? That's kind of what I think the big decision the board made around the student fees, not charging them this year. However, we have all of this data that we also worked through, and I concur the data is not highly reliable, accurate, or detailed. So it's very difficult to say what kind of integrity do these hold, and to go after people and request that they pay these things. Do we even have the full set of information? So I really appreciate this coming forth, because I think it will help us clean up historical. What do we do in that regard for a past recommendation, and also prevent that and put better, more consistent procedures in place moving forward. So.
All right, so let's keep going to the last one here quickly, so that we can get to, we have the last little section of stuff that I wanted to hit on before you.
Hoping this one's a slam dunk, which I probably jinxed myself for. So this one corresponds to employee reimbursements for employees' travel. So traditionally, the district's policy is we will reimburse you up to what's called the GSA limit, which we'll talk about in a minute, with receipts. So what happens is the General Services Administration is a federal government agency. They set a meals and incidental rate for every location in the United States, and say and a lot of companies, a lot of nonprofits, a lot of local governments all use the GSA rates because they're kind of set by the federal government. But what we do probably the most complicated, which is we go up to the GSA limit plus we need receipts, and we spend a amazing amount of time looking at people's receipts for meals they spend. And we spend an amazing amount of time trying to clarify rules. So for example, right now, one of the rules is because the CVG airport is within our kind of area, we don't pay you for a meal at the airport. So then people say, well, if I can't get paid to eat lunch at the airport, what if I get a meal on the plane? Okay, well, you're in the air, you're outside a region, but we all know airplane food is awful and it's 4 times more expensive, right? And so talking with our other partners, again, the Jen and the Men conversation of other ones, like most other folks will switch to just a per diem, right? So you travel, you come in, you get your per diem rate, right? And most of the times it's like, it's up to most places in America, it's $68 a day. It can go down from there. It can go up from there actually. But our kind of idea would be, can we just switch for employee travel, for meals, and switch from having all the receipts and all that to just doing a per diem rate for employees? It would save us, we calculated, would save us over 1,300 hours of staff time a year. So this is like one of those work smarter, not harder kind of things. This is one of those, how do we change business? It would save the travelers and their staff probably an amount of time. And it just gets people flexibility. Like we have all these things like, oh, I just want a bottle of water. Well, we don't really pay for snacks. Okay, so I can go to the restaurant and get a meal I don't eat and a bottle of water, and we'll pay that. Like, so I don't know. I mean, it seems like a really clean change. I think the employees will really enjoy it, those who travel. I know our staff will enjoy it. I think it takes a lot of contention and a lot of detail that doesn't need to be there out of this process.
So and again, I think what we're offering this out is for them to come back with a policy that would reflect a switch from reimbursements to per diem. I don't know if board have any issues with that.
Sounds like a no-brainer.
Thank you.
I would say, I think the one thing that would come with that is just making sure whatever systems we use to track it and all that kind of stuff is part of whatever we put in the policy, because I think sometimes we also have policies that reiterate things that we don't overuse or ways that we do stuff that we no longer do it that way. So really quickly,
Sorry, I was just gonna say there is a job related expenses policy, which is 3440.
Yes.
So I don't know if instead of creating a new policy, is it more so just adding language to that one?
I actually don't know that we need to change the policy. I think the
Okay.
policy, I think 3440 says that the treasurer will create procedures for reimbursing people for job-related expenses. So I'm not
maybe
even.
a change of procedure
So
then.
just be more procedure than.
But this is a big procedure. That's why we wanted to
It's a
bring it
big
here,
change,
right?
yeah.
This isn't just like, oh, fill out this form instead of this form. This is a much.
I do think this is something that would come before, it should go before a policy committee also, and then actually at some point through the full board, but Lauren, to your point.
And other benefit of reduction in audit and compliance risk, because with every receipt that they process is a risk that something deviates from the rules and so on and so forth. So I think this would be a lot cleaner from an audit perspective too.
Cool. Well, that is all of the new policy suggestions. Thank you for that hard work. The last section we're going to cover before we depart for the holidays. And I know some folks may have to leave early, so feel free to decide if you need to. Just wanted to again we're in this period of time, we're in the budget cycle, and I think one of the things we can maybe do, and Jen, I don't know if you can do this in a quick way.
Yeah.
But there are a couple really key points that I just wanted to put in that I thought it'd be good for Jen to put in front of us to think about as we're talking about building the budget. So Jen, you want to?
Yeah, so Rob, if you can bring the budget's timeline up I sent you or shared with you. We had a budget steering committee meeting last night, so I didn't have a chance to post it or do anything. But because of changes in the growth plan, we're having to, doing the staffing budgets has become a little bit more complicated. So we're taking the time rather than to put something out, and Julie Sellers really suggested delaying it until January so that we have time to go through how does the staff change during a consolidation versus a combination versus a restructure? Pretty complicated. So we're taking time to do that, review it before it goes out, and people start freaking out. So I can't read that. So we're taking the first part of January to do that work. We'll send that out. Oh, come on. I can't talk and type at the same time.
Here, budget timeline.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
I can't see yours either.
Oh, okay. You got it 150%.
I'm over 60. Come on. Okay, so hopefully by the end of that first week in January, we'll finish with the quality control review is what I'm calling it. And then we'll send it staffing out to the schools by the 9th, and then they have an appeal process. So that gets taken care of, and that feeds into the transfer rounds, which will be pretty complex this year, I believe. That usually starts in early February, so we're just a little bit behind our normal schedule. We're gonna do training on Allaview, retrain, refresh, train new people, late in January. We'll send the non-personnel stuff and load it in right when they're done being trained. So it'll be fresh in their mind on how to do what to do. And then we will kick off the central office and actually teach them what zero-based budgeting really is and what our budget targets, initiatives that we want funded. So we're hoping the deadline for the schools to submit their budgets back to us will be February 14th. They have to go through ILT and LSDMC meetings to get there. Then the deadline for central office will be just a week later, 2 weeks later. That gives us the first couple weeks in March for the senior leadership team, for us to do the consolidation, go through all our checklists to make sure nobody missed anything, like last year when Schedule E got submitted a day after I presented publicly, stuff like that. And then, you know, the gas is always greater than the target, so we have some time to make recommendations. We're hoping to go with a first public presentation in April, the first board meeting in April. We'll use April and May to do public engagement and seek board approval on June 23rd, so I can file with the Hamilton County Budget Commission on the 26th. And over to the right of that, I have little prayer hands. I don't know if you can see my little emoji. Oh, it's on my screen, but it's not over there. Okay, anyway, I added little prayers. So we're gonna meet June 26th for my last year here. So if you'll switch over to the budget target sheet. This is real quick. And so this is a work in progress. I don't want anybody getting any number firm in their head because there's a lot of moving parts and I don't have all the information yet. Good job, Rob. You're awesome. So you see that over there in highlight red, work in progress. So our forecast, our November forecast, this is where we start with the budget target, is we said our forecast can't be higher than our revenues, right? So that's the 624 million that we've estimated based on current information around student enrollment that drives state foundation payments, property tax values, blah, blah, blah. 624 million. If we do the cash reserve plan, we'll take 12 million off the top. So that means we only have 612 million left to spend. Okay, so now look at the current year budget at 644. This is kind of answering Mr. Lindy's question about keeping that positive cash balance. So if we do nothing different, or we have step increases that are already negotiated, we've bringing on the crossing guards, we said it's going to bring us an extra $1 million in budget. We have to bring the Suzuki back to the general funds this year. We used a grant that had some money sitting in it, a local grant. We promised the unions who sacrificed their PD money to help balance the budget this year that it would return in the following year. We have there's a line in there for COLA. We're getting ready to enter negotiations. Just a point that 1% COLA costs the general fund about $4 million. Mike's recalculating it now with the current staff, so I can get a more firm number there. The technology return, we actually used that tail end of the ESSER money to help pay for some of the technology leases this year, so that money comes back next year. The centralized enrollment is an initiative. It's not going to cost anything. We're just realigning staff to create that. And then the Montessori expansion is a relocation of preschool Montessori of teachers and supplies. And we delayed the Rawson renovation of $350,000 in the 24 budget because they weren't going to be able to get it done and spend it, right? So that's a $15 million add to what we're already spending. And then we're offsetting it with the gross savings that I'm waiting for all this revision staff stuff to happen to update that number. But you remember the net savings was 1.4 million. Then we come to the preschool expansion. So I'm estimating at the end of this year, we'll have about $10 million left in cash carryover. If our combined budgets go beyond the 15 million. Okay, so I have that as a placeholder. So sitting today, we're looking at about 45 million at least in spending reductions. Keep in mind that the budget supports recurring costs, but it also supports one-time costs that can be replaced with some of these issues. And so we'll keep reporting on this as we go. I did not post any of this stuff publicly because we just worked through it last night, but just wanted to see, and it's going to be a painful conversation. The budget will be a painful time this year because we're trying to fund new initiatives, strategic stuff, and we have to let go of some things. Remember my water bottle analogy. Okay, so so we're going to the zero-based staffing method, and we're trying to decide within the budget steering committee how to make that happen at all of you. Mike did this beautiful document, and this actually started with Mike and Derek Little last year when we were trying to identify what is our really discretionary funds spending. And so you can go through that, but you can, right at the bottom, there's a fixed and regulatory, $51 million right off the top, you can't cut. Because it's debt payments or the auditor's fees or blah, blah, blah. So, so then what does that leave you? And then so they broke it, we refined some of the categories to be a little bit more meaningful. Board discretionary, the union negotiated staff. Why don't you take over some extra documents?
Say whatever. Yeah, so obviously board discretionary things the board controls directly. Union negotiated staffing is staffing for all of our collective bargaining agreements. You know, CFT is the biggest of those, but AFSCME, IUA, all of them have as well. Other negotiated staffing are basically other things in the collective bargaining agreements aren't staff, like the PD. The PD fund is a good example that Jen mentioned. District created formulas is probably the place where we have the most leeway, but those are things like your APs. Those are things like some of the pairs we have, those things. So there's a lot of leeway there, but there are also critical things, you know, counselors, social workers. Core instructional operations are just basically your core curriculum and the people support that. We also have the same thing with business operations. So that's like, you know, payroll team, AP team, you know, HR staff, people are doing that work.
So the salary of the treasurer and the salary of the superintendent, because you're required to have those, you can't cut them, are in the district fixed line, but our departments are in the core operations.
There's a couple others here. So individualized needs, which we started out calling non-formula. So like, what is that? But this is a lot of the individual student needs. So these are like your related service providers, your OTs, PTs, speech pathologists, you know, people who we work because they're serving individual student needs. And then supplemental operations, it's kind of that next tier of things. If they're not core, they're supplemental. Also some really important things are in there. And then enrichment obviously is your arts, your sports and such. So I think that's kind of a high level of the categories. You can see I got the totals in here for this year. And so as we build out, I guess 26, you know, we'll start to put these numbers and where they fall.
So we really just wanted to introduce this quickly. So that is on our thoughts and as we go into the next year on the budget. I don't think we have time today for real discussion around it. But again, recognizing that this is going to be a difficult year and how we do our budgets, because everyone's going to have to start from zero, you add in the things that you have to do. And then from there, we're going to be looking at what can we do, what can we not do.
Right.
So if there's nothing else, I just want to wish everyone a very happy holiday season. Everybody have safe travels and safe times with your family. And if there's nothing else,